But actually, many areas of England and Wales will begin the day on Sunday with a lot of dry weather and actually some hazy sunshine for eastern England and eastern Scotland for a time on Sunday too. So here that should help to lift those temperatures and actually a much warmer day to come, perhaps by the afternoon, temperatures into the low 20s for many. Further west, though, we continue to see spells of rain pushing in from the Atlantic, particularly across Northern Ireland, northwest England and western Scotland. Some heavy bursts of rain here, but a warmer day nonetheless, 18 or 19 degrees in the north and the west. The rain pushes southeastwards on Sunday night, so a wet day to come for many parts of England and Wales. Some heavy bursts of rain at times pushing their way slowly eastwards, so pretty damp and soggy picture for much of the day in the east and the southeast. Brighter skies with showers follow, and that sets the scene for the week ahead. Quite unsettled and cool, showery, and temperatures a little bit below average.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
£76,543 and 21 pence in tax-free cash could be yours this summer. That's totally tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. And remember, because it's totally tax-free cash, you'll get to keep every single penny. For a chance to win, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB21 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 26th of June. This is a network giveaway. Entries will be pooled. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Is completely unique in the way that we interact with our viewers.
Our audience aren't afraid to have their say. They want their voices heard now, and they've got a channel where that can happen.
I find more and more as I'm wandering around, people come up to me and they say, we saw you on television. I say, oh yes, on what? On GB News.
Hello, are you the famous Sue? The whole crew with me here now. We came to celebrate.
It's our job to be the eyes and ears of the viewers.
They are part of the GB News family, and I'm pleased to say it's a very large family.
And if people go to the time and trouble of listening and watching, then we've got to do a good job for them.
Well, I'm here right in the epicentre of the protest.
Here we go again.
You just tuned in. Where have you been?
It is raucous here tonight.
That's what makes us the fearless champion of Britain.
Good morning, Britain. Good evening, America. Hello, wherever you are watching around the world. We are live from London, England. This is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America. Well, breaking tonight, more extraordinary and shocking revelations from the Henry Novak saga. The cover-up row deepens. The Sunday Times is reporting that police allegedly wanted to portray murdered teenager Henry as the aggressor before backing down after outrage from his family. Also breaking tonight, Sir Keir Starmer will fight any leadership election against Andy Burnham as the government makes its clearest move yet that they are in a full-blown crisis.
Prime Minister, it's your time up! Have you lost the country, Prime Minister? Is your term over? Are you finished, Mr Starmer?
The inimitable Keith Bayes holding the Prime Minister to account there. In other news, D-Day warning, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, uses a speech in Normandy to warn Europe it's facing a new invasion through mass migration.
Different European beaches are stormed by different dangerous ideologies.
And yet more crisis in the police forces of this country. An official body representing Muslim police officers has been accused of defending Hamas and spreading disturbing claims about the October 7 attacks. $6 billion military disaster. A $6 billion military disaster. MPs slam the government's delayed military investment plans and question whether Britain's key armoured vehicle is even fit for combat. I'm Will Kingston and this is The Late Show Live. Welcome to The Late Show Live, ladies and gentlemen. Well, joining me this evening in London is my panel, political commentators Benedict Spence and Matthew Stadlen, and in Washington DC, the chair of the Republican Overseas UK, Greg Swenson, and political commentator and friend of the show, Hilary Fordwich. Thank you one and all for your time this morning and this evening, respectively. Well, and this news broke, ladies and gentlemen, from the Sunday Times in the last hour or so, and I'm still reeling from it. Just when you think that this story cannot get any more shocking, well, here we are. Breaking tonight, police at the centre of the Henry Novak scandal reportedly tried to intervene during his killer's murder trial over fears about what people were saying online. According to the Sunday Times, the Hampshire police wanted to issue a public statement during the trial to combat what they called misinformation surrounding the case. But prosecutors warned the force, that doing so could risk jeopardising the integrity of the trial itself. And tonight, the revelations go even further and I would suggest even darker. The paper claims officers wanted to portray Henry Novak as the aggressor in official statements released after his death, despite having evidence proving this was not the case, before changing course following what I would say is justified outrage from his grieving family. Think about that for a second, ladies and gentlemen. A dying teenager handcuffed on the pavement.
You've been stabbed? Whereabouts? Don't think you have, mate.
Never comfortable when we had to show that footage, but it is important that we do in order for justice to be attained. Police doubting he'd ever been stabbed and now claims the force wanted to intervene in the middle of a murder trial while public anger exploded across Britain and America. No wonder trust in Britain's institutions is collapsing. And I must say, what we are learning tonight now draws into even more further question whether or not we will see the type of reform that is needed across the police forces of the United Kingdom, or whether we will get yet more lack of transparency and more pushback in an attempt to cover their own backside. Of course, joining me is my panel, London political commentators Benedict Spence and Matthew Stadlen, and in Washington, Chair of the Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson, and of course Hilary Fordwich. Thank you one and all. Benedict, I'll start with you, and we have now been talking about this story for weeks. I still find it incredibly difficult to talk about. I find it combination of infuriating and saddening. What do you make of what you've read in the Times this evening?
I mean, I think it just compounds the levels of incompetence, frankly, that we've seen from Hampshire Police. This will have been very well known to them that actually putting out a statement midway through a trial to try and address certain things that they think may be wrong risks jeopardising a trial. And ultimately, that's not fair to the victim's family, but it's also not fair to the accused. At this moment in time, I don't think Vikram Digra had been convicted, and he has the right to a fair trial. The police wading in, sort of because that's what they think they ought to do, without necessarily thinking these things through, is a very dangerous thing, both for those on trial as well as disrespectful to the victims. And I think it's quite right that the Crown Prosecution Service said to them, what on earth do you think you're doing? This is unacceptable. But, you know, to also try and attempt to frame this with that initial statement of Henry Novak of being the aggressor, again, that's not actually for the police to say. They can, by all means, try and, you know, with the Crown Prosecution Service, make a case. But that's actually ultimately for a jury to decide what were the events that happened and therefore where the fault lies. And again, it adds some sort of element, almost as if there were a sort of a balancing act going on. It doesn't actually matter really what had happened, whether Henry Novak was the aggressor. If he wasn't, as you said, there was plenty of evidence to suggest that there wasn't, that he wasn't that. The point is, we were talking about a man on trial for murder. And ultimately, whatever Henry Novak may or may not have said, that does not in any way exonerate or lessen the fact that Vikram Digra murdered him and everything else that went on around that.
Yeah, Matthew, on the first of these two revelations that the Crown prosecutions, that I should say, that the police force were intending to release a public statement mid-trial but were then rebuffed by the Crown Prosecution Service, it is the police forces of this country so often that warn us against releasing information during trials at risk of influencing a trial mid-proceedings. This is extraordinary that the police would then intend to do that very same thing.
Just briefly on what Benedict said, I didn't think there's any suggestion that Henry Novak said anything wrong to his killer. I think we should be really clear about that. In terms of disrupting a trial, the integrity of trials in this country, the integrity of justice is absolutely critical. And you say, well, that we've been talking about this for weeks. We haven't actually. We've been talking about it for about a week since the...
GBNews has been talking about it for weeks.
Well, we should only have been talking about it for a week since the sentence was passed down on the killer. And by the way, there's a whole conversation to be had as to whether that sentence should have been a harder sentence. There were online trolls criticising the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, for not coming out sooner. But in fact, Starmer came out after the sentencing, very quickly after the sentencing, and made clear that there were questions that needed answers.
Matthew, that's not what
let me just make the point. I'm sorry, I've got to finish my point before you criticise me. The Prime Minister...
Matthew, I'm hosting.
Yeah,
Matthew,
fine. Well, I don't know why you're interrupting. Why have me on the show at midnight if you're not going to let me finish my opening remarks?
Matthew, I'm hosting because you're not answering my question. I'm not asking about Keir Starmer. I'm asking about why the Hampshire Police Force thought it was appropriate to release a statement mid-trial when so often the police forces of this country are well aware that if people release information mid-trial, it can prejudice proceedings. That's what I'm interested in.
I've already answered that. I've said, and the Keir Starmer point is part of this, that the integrity of trials and the integrity of justice in this country are absolutely critical, and it was clearly made abundantly clear to the police force, so I believe it was ultimately up to them whether they did intervene or not, by the Crown Prosecution Service, that it would not be helpful to the trial, to the conduct of the trial and to achieving justice. My point about Starmer is that the accusations levelled at him, I don't know whether by you or not, Will, that he should have intervened more quickly here, are ridiculous and dangerous because actually what he did was wait for the sentencing.
We can get to that.
And that is correct.
OK, we can get to that.
I can't, by the way, speak for the police force. The police force will have to speak for themselves. I've been trying to get my head around some of this story in the Sunday Times.
Let's give other people a go. Hilary, what are your reflections on what we've heard from the Sunday Times this evening?
Well, I think from what we've heard from the Sunday Times, absolutely ghastly, and all it does is reinforce actually the worst sentiments that we've seen, the worst that we've seen over this ever since that footage was released. I think it just confirms that. But also, if I could just make mention, when we were talking about Henry Novak, I will say one thing. Number one, his family made sure to put in their statement that he was very inclusive. He actually was with his football teammates celebrating the end of term, which is a diverse team. There is nothing in his history, nothing in his character that anybody said ever from anywhere that would indicate he would have any made a racial slur or had any racial prejudices. So I think that's number one. And then also with regard to this incident, I think the whole thing is because it's not one isolated case. This is on top of all the other things that have happened in the UK, not the least of which was in Manchester, of course, where we had the Ariana Grande concert, and when the security guard said that he didn't want to stop all those Muslim men with the backpacks because he thought he would be thought it would be a racist incident. I think it comes on the back of so many other incidents. And last but not least, with regard to Sir Keir Starmer, although that's not the exact question you asked me, Will, but I will say the issue is the contrast between his reaction to this incident with Henry versus George Floyd, when he went down on the knee, and that was the other side of the world. It wasn't somebody that was English. It wasn't in the British Isles. And the outrage that happened from that and his comments there, it's the contrast, I think, that has set this off like a tinderbox in England. It's like the last straw.
Greg, on the second revelation that we've heard from the Sunday Times, that 3 days after the death of Henry Novak, the police were planning on releasing a public statement that would suggest still that Henry Novak was the aggressor in the altercation that cost him his life. By that stage, we had, I would suggest, incontrovertible evidence that that was not the case, and it was only the family's pleas that stopped this statement from going out. What I would suggest is that this raises further questions as to whether or not we will actually get transparency from the police, or whether or not this will just lead to more and more covering up of what really happened here. How do you reflect on it?
Yeah, look, just when we thought this couldn't get any worse, and it really has. And so what we've seen really is a combination of two really horrendous woke policies that have been really damaging to both the United States and the United Kingdom. And one is, of course, the institutionalization of DEI and diversity training and basically racism by the police in their training manuals. And then the second one is this excuse that governments use. We did it here in the United States during the Biden years. When governments use misinformation or disinformation as an excuse to either censor or to pollute, in this case, pollute a case with falsehoods. And so, you know, and the good news is it can be fixed. And we've done it here in the United States. But for 4 years, we had, we had a lot of that disinformation excuse. We had a Department of Homeland Security's misinformation department, which is basically code for censorship. And of course, we had the institutionalization as well of DEI, and President Biden called it the all of government effort on equity. And so it can be fixed, and it has been here, and I hope we can do the same in the UK.
Yeah, the concern with me for the disinformation revelation this evening is that if the police are going to say that there is disinformation swirling around, you have to be able to trust them. And most certainly, they can't be releasing disinformation themselves. And there is the perception from this reporting, and we'll need to understand it further, but there is the very clear perception that if they were 3 days after the event to suggest that he was still the aggressor, that would have been an example of disinformation itself. So that's something which we still need to explore more. But I'm going to explore that more now with our first guest for the evening, political editor at The Independent, David Maddox. David, we'll start with the Sunday Times reporting that you are no doubt across. Your reflections on what you've read.
I think it's pretty shocking stuff. I mean, I can't help but get out of my mind that it's a different police force, admittedly, but it's a police force that is trying to prevent all the Mandelson papers from coming out because they claim that it might influence a trial. And here we have an example of a police force trying to make an intervention which would have undoubtedly influenced a trial and possibly got a murderer off scot-free, you know, given what their intentions were in this shocking case. I mean, it's a classic case, I'm afraid, of an institution trying to cover its backside because it knew that trouble's coming down the road. I mean, this isn't about disinformation. This is about them been poor from the very start. I disagree with Greg in the sense that, you know, he kind of frames it as a woke problem. This is just bad practice from the very start, you know, that allowed this young man to die without any effort to save his life. In fact, potentially, you know, hastening his death. and they were clearly trying to cover themselves. But, you know, I mean, there's been a lot of questions about the Chief Constable, Alexis Boone. Surely his position's got to be under question tonight. The other person, you know, Kemi Badenoch has been superb on this issue, and she's won a lot of plaudits for what she's said and the measured way she's approached it. But the Police and Crime Commissioner in Hampshire is one of the kind of rising stars of the Conservative Party, Donna Jones. She was actually nominated for the Hampshire mayor position. She's still their candidate for that, and yet, you know, she's a police and crime commissioner of Hampshire Police. What on earth was she doing? And you know, there's going to be quite serious questions about the Conservative Party, you know, continuing with her as their mayoral candidate.
Yeah, David, to your first point, do you think that the people of this country can still trust their police forces?
Well, I think on the whole they can. I mean, there's always bad practice in every institution. There's always bad individuals. There's always mistakes. I think the general, you know, our police are overwhelmed. I mean, we see this with the shoplifting thing. It's a different issue, but, you know, the police are unable to properly tackle shoplifting, and that's because so much money is, you know, sent elsewhere. You know, we spend a fortune on welfare, but we spend minimum on policing, for example, and that's where, you know, it certainly needs more resource. It needs more support, and that's where the issue is.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunately all we have time for now, David. Thank you very much for staying up this evening. A spokesman for the Independent Office for Police Conduct has said, "Our thoughts and sympathies are with Henry Novak's family and everyone affected by his death. We are independently investigating the contact Hampshire and Isle of Wight officers had with Mr Nowak prior to his death on December 4, including the use of handcuffs by officers and the first aid provided. An investigation which began following a mandatory referral from the force that we received the same day remains ongoing, and the officers involved are currently being treated as witnesses." Still ahead on The Late Show Live, an official body representing Muslim police officers has been accused of defending Hamas and spreading disturbing claims about the October 7 attacks. But first tonight,
different European beaches are stormed by different dangerous ideologies.
that is the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. He has used a speech in Normandy on D-Day to warn Europe it's facing an invasion through mass migration. Was he right to use that language? Well, this is The Late Show Live. We'll be talking about that after the break, only on the People's Channel, GBNews.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis, in the car,
in the kitchen,
GB News Breakfast is there.
With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it? We're here again to start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question.
Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in,
I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way.
You will not want to miss it, trust me. The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm grounded in the job that I'm doing, which is to make sure we are closer to the EU.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live with me, Will Kingston, filling in for the great Ben Leo. Well, bombshell new polling has revealed how Brits truly feel about Brexit and Sir Keir Starmer's EU reset. That's coming up shortly. But first, a GB News alert. United States Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has warned Europe must fight a new type of invasion on its beaches in his D-Day speech. Speaking earlier today, he likened the continent's current migration levels to the Second World War D-Day landings, warning that beaches are being stormed by different dangerous ideologies.
Sadly, today, different European beaches are stormed by different dangerous ideologies. Boats and men arrive. When will European capitals do something about that invasion?
With me now, former Conservative MP Louise Mensch. Louise, lovely to have you with us this morning. Let's go to Hegseth's comments and the word, unsurprisingly, that many people on the left will take issue with is the word invasion. Now, people can quibble over the meaning of the word invasion, and perhaps it takes away from the core point, but surely the core point that different and dangerous ideologies are entering Europe and are fundamentally changing the social fabric is now incontrovertible.
Quite possibly, but I think we wouldn't be having this debate right now if he had done this intervention on European migration, which is obviously a key preoccupation of the Trump administration. That's his prerogative. He can attack Europe if he likes. What he shouldn't have done was to tie that into D-Day. D-Day is a sacred day of remembrance every single year, as it should be. It's about the actual actions that were fought at Omaha, at Utah, at Juneau, at Sword, at Gold Beaches. That's what counts and that's what matters. Tens of thousands of Allied troops died in that invasion, and it is about World War II. What he was doing was absolutely disgracefully, and I really have no nuance on this point whatsoever, disgracefully interjecting domestic politics, politics that I agree with, but still domestic politics, into the D-Day celebrations. Not the time, not the place. If you want to say that, go right ahead. You have freedom of speech, you're the Secretary of War, it's probably a good point. What it isn't is a good point during the celebrations and commemorations of D-Day. Every service member I've spoken to has been profoundly shocked by it, and it's as though the man has no sense of occasion or decorum whatsoever. And I think what we all have to remember is that D-Day is about the veterans and about their descendants and about the heroism that happened that day, June the 6th, 1944, terrible massacre on the beach. And it really isn't about cheap political points, whether from either side of the aisle, whether I agree with them, which I kind of do, or not.
Yeah, so Louise, I agree with your sentiments there, except for the fact that I think that Peter Hegseth does have a sense of occasion. I don't think he is stupid by any means. I think he's an intelligent guy. He would have known exactly what he was doing, injecting a political message into what is normally a very sombre, apolitical day. So why do you think he did it?
Look, I'll concede your point, but I'm afraid that makes it a bit worse for Mr. Hegseth, doesn't it? That means he knew what he was doing. He knew that he was injecting a contentious political point, again, whether we agree or not, but very contentious political point across Europe, certainly in Britain. He didn't mention Britain, but he did name various European countries and attack them over the migration. And he knew he was doing it on D-Day when all eyes would be on him. I'm afraid I think it was a bit narcissistic. It was beneath his office, and I hope that he won't do something like that again. Frankly, he's not doing so well shepherding the war in Iran at the moment. It's taking far too long. He doesn't have a fourth stage plan. He fired the Army Chief of Staff in the middle of it. I'd say look to your own house, Mr. Hegseth. Take care of your own battles, and please leave the D-Day celebrations to be the sacred occasion that everybody on all sides of the political aisle ought to treat them as.
Putting the timing of this message to one side, the more general principle of commenting on Western civilisational decline in Europe and the United Kingdom, which Hegseth has done and JD Vance did recently as well, do you think it is right that these leading American political figures are commenting on this civilisational struggle that we are facing in the West?
I don't know. You know, I'm actually torn about this, which is interesting, because I'm the kind of person that just really is not known to sit on the fence. But I think it was when JD Vance attacks my immigration, I think he should have got his facts right. The guy that slaughtered Henry Nowak was born and bred in Britain. He wasn't an immigrant. His mother was an immigrant, and she's been convicted of a lesser crime, but the actual murderer wasn't an immigrant. So maybe now is not the time. However, I think perhaps Keir Starmer attacking him has totally lost the right to do so, because as it was just mentioned in your last panel, your last topic, Keir Starmer disgracefully, alongside Angela Rayner, then the deputy leader of the Labour Party, took a knee over George Floyd when that issue was absolutely rife in American politics. If we would like the Americans to stay out of our politics, maybe we should stay out of theirs. You know, as a dual citizen, I wish both sides would just stop interfering in each other's business. But let's not forget, Keir Starmer did it first. I would say hypocrisy, thy name is Starmer. It was so mortally embarrassing to see him down on that carpet in Westminster. I can cringe still thinking of it. I've got empathetic embarrassment. Honestly, how dare he attack JD Vance when he did it first?
Yeah, Louise, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Let's go to the panel in DC first. And Greg, I'll start with you. On principle, do you think it is right to see American political figures commenting not just on the UK, but the way that they are framing it as a broader civilisational struggle in this way?
Yeah, I do. And I think if this was some minor political issue, you know, like talking about the NHS or the price of pharmaceuticals or some other political topic, okay, that might be a little bit invasive. But this is a crisis. And if the polls in the United Kingdom as well as in Ireland indicate that the top two issues for people are the cost of living and mass migration, especially illegal migration. So we're no longer at, expressing political differences. This is a crisis. So I think the Secretary of War had was actually quite wise to bring it up in a moment where people will notice, because it is a crisis. I'm afraid that many governments aren't going to do anything about it. And the parties of the center left and center right have been neglecting the voters for a generation now. And I think it's important that both JD Vance as well as Pete Hegseth pointed out, and good for them.
Matthew, your response both to Louise's comments and Greg's contrasting comments.
There's so much to say. I think much of what Louise said I thought was spot on. I think those comments by Hegseth were truly disgraceful. I'd say disgusting, actually. How dare he try to bring politics, and nasty politics of that, into a day in which we commemorate the unbelievably brave men and women who fought for our freedom. I mean, it's truly outrageous. I'm not surprised by it anymore because it comes from this administration, but I am nonetheless deeply shocked by it. My own grandfather, for goodness sake, won the Military Cross for his bravery ahead of the D-Day landings, going up on his motorbike to the German enemy lines for reconnaissance work. And as Louise said, the fact that surviving veterans are so appalled by what the Secretary of State has said just emphasises the point. It is truly outrageous. By the way, just because Greg earlier, I didn't have a chance to respond, was talking about disinformation and misinformation. Where there's disinformation or misinformation from any institution in Britain, a light needs to be shone on it. But just to hear an American, a Republican, complaining about disinformation... I'm not even going to let my finish my point.
Matthew, we've got 2 minutes and everyone needs to have a chance to speak. Hillary, your thoughts on the topic we are currently talking about, which is Hegseth's comments on the D-Day today, yesterday.
Well, actually, what I would do, Will, is to defer to the veteran, not today with regard to D-Day, but he said recently, in recent months, the 100-year-old veteran, he says he didn't know what he fought for now with the state of how England is today. And when I agree with Louise in terms of not bringing politics into it, but I more agree actually with Greg to the fact that he wasn't talking about some minutiae of some kind of political platform. He was talking about the seriousness of an invasion, and he actually could have said, which he didn't say, which I have said before, which is, but we didn't give the Germans, and we wouldn't have given them free housing, free food, given them housing when the British actually, there's a housing crisis in the UK and people don't have anywhere, they can't buy a new property. And remember, there were the riots outside of the hotel because the immigrants were protesting because there weren't enough video control in the rooms, because there were 3 of them and there were only 2 video game controls. My goodness gracious, that is an invasion, and that's what they're being given. That would have been totally and utterly unfathomable to have given those to the Nazis.
Benedict.
Well, that's not true. Germany received huge amounts of money to rebuild its cities that the Allies destroyed during the Second World War, far much more than the British actually received, but that's slightly beside the point. Listen, the Second World War was as much an American conflict as it was a European one. The Americans won the right, I think, therefore, to opine at our memorials for it. Whether or not we may like the tone or what the subject is, ultimately, I think that what the Americans see with Europe is a theatre that is within their sphere of influence. They don't want to get involved in another war in Europe. They've made that very clear, especially the Trump administration. And I think that a lot of what they opine on is about trying to avoid the creation of new conflicts where they may arise. I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing to say. I do think that the tone wasn't particularly great, but ultimately, if we're going to sort of sit here so far away in time, actually, from when D-Day was, and you look at what we actually mean by a memorial, and people say, learn the lessons, we need to at least discuss the lessons. We can't just sit here and go, all of these people died and it's very sad, and nobody should say anything else about it.
Well, the one thing I would say is that, as is so often the case with the Trump administration, I think there is real truth in many of the messages coming out, but we are stuck talking about language and tone as opposed to the actual issues. And it raises the question as to whether or not they need to actually consider that if they want to get their message through more clearly. Let's take a look at some of the other main news here in America, or I should say across the pond in America. 3 British men have admitted killing a restaurant owner in Canada. Robert Evans Jr. pleaded guilty on Friday to the manslaughter of Sharif Rahman after a row over an unpaid restaurant bill in the town of Owen Sound in August 2023. His father and uncle also pleaded guilty to being accessories to the crime and have been sentenced to time already served. Elsewhere, a massive coastal resort development in Albania linked to President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner has sparked days of protests. Police have fired water cannon and clashed with demonstrators in the capital Tirana this week as public anger grows. Plans for the luxury project boast hotels, apartments, villas and a marina across 2 sites, including a wildlife reserve, which is a key stopover for migratory birds, including flamingos. Not a fact that I was aware of. And finally, Canada's Food Inspection Agency has announced a temporary ban on livestock from the US state of Texas after flesh-eating screwworms were discovered in calves this week. All the news that is essential for you, ladies and gentlemen. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, is President Trump right to order the removal of what he sees as woke quotes on a war memorial? I'll reveal what they are shortly. But first tonight, An official body representing Muslim police officers has been accused of defending Hamas and spreading disturbing claims about the October 7 attacks. Yet another story involving police scandal. We're going to get into that after the break. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter? So that's a very live question. Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way.
You will not want to miss it, trust me. The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howard. This is the show where each week we see what's happening in the world of culture, current affairs and politics.
First we'll say, welcome to the UK. Oh, thank you.
And we're not afraid to use our free speech so that you can use yours.
It's not controversial in the slightest to anyone who hasn't lost their mind.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
They want to make a deal. We've had very good talks over the last 24 hours.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. Don't forget you can get your comments through to gbnews.com/your say, and they are coming through thick and fast after that last conversation. Sarah has said on whether or not Hegseth should have raised those political issues during the D-Day speech. The reason he did it is because if people don't speak out, the situation remains. Ask any of those veterans what they think. They are disgusted with the state of the country and the current, in inverted commas, invasion. That was President Trump just a few weeks ago in that shot that we just saw, or in that clip I should say that we just saw. So why is America backstriking Iranian sites? And is a ceasefire really still in place? That's coming up shortly. But first, right now, the Telegraph is reporting that the body representing British Muslim police officers has defended Hamas against what it stated was unverified stories about acts of violence. The policy paper in question from the National Association of Muslim Police also described the Israel Defense Forces as a Zionist terror group and went on to brand Zionism as one of the manifestations of anti-Muslim hatred. So with accusations of two-tier policing being levelled at the police after the brutal murder of Henry Novak, just what effect will these latest revelations have on confidence in the police force? With me now, the chairman of the Reform Jewish Alliance, Gary Mond. Gary, thank you very much for taking the time. What did you make of this story in The Telegraph?
It's absolutely disgraceful, and it destroys all confidence that the Jewish community have in the police. This organisation, the National Association of Muslim Police, one wonders what its actual purpose of its existence really is. What is completely unacceptable is any form of politicisation of any part of the police force. The fact that a group like that is able to tell blatant lies and defend a terrorist group such as Hamas, which murdered 1,200 people on the 7th of October 2023, took vast numbers of people hostages and indeed murdered babies, and they actually deny that babies were murdered, and they're frankly telling a pack of lies. How this can be allowed and how we can have any confidence in the police is beyond me. The individuals behind this article need to be removed. I'm wondering why there is a National Association of Muslim Police. I'm not sure there's a National Association of Christian Police or of Hindu Police or of Jewish Police. What exactly is the purpose of this group? It seems to be to promote political issues within the police, which is totally and utterly unacceptable.
You've actually taken my next question out of my mouth. I myself was wondering, what is the purpose of basically splitting up the police force into different cultural or religious groups? But allow me to steel man out an argument that they may say, and that would be that Muslim police officers have particular challenges that they face. Potentially they have to police in heavily Muslim or predominantly Muslim areas, which would come with its own challenges. Perhaps they have particular religious accommodations that need to be made for them. Can you see any reason for why there would be a necessity for this type of association for Muslim police officers?
Not really. It's exceptionally tenuous, I have to say. I think that if Muslim officers have got certain cultural requirements, they can be adhered to without actually forming an organisation that is blatantly political. And I fear this sort of thing has developed not just under this present Labour government, but under the previous Conservative government. We have seen generally a trend to wokeism, and we've seen a tolerance of anti-Semitism in so many areas of life, public life, in schools, in hospitals, particularly at the universities, in the world of entertainment, at the Glastonbury Festival, in the courts, and now we're seeing, possibly worst of all, in the police, where we expect policing to be done with no fear nor favour, but I'm afraid that the vast majority of the Jewish community have lost confidence in the police force.
Gary, just quickly, whilst we still have time, you may have answered this before, I may have missed it, but are you aware of any equivalent Jewish police associations?
I'm not, no. Certainly not a formal one. Maybe an informal grouping, but certainly nothing formally.
Okay, that makes sense. Just finally, you've talked about the lack of trust that you believe the Jewish community now does not have, or that it has in the police force. How can the police forces of this country go about rebuilding trust? I would suggest both with the Jewish community, but not just to make it limited to them. How can they go about rebuilding trust more generally?
Of course, we have the Henry Novak situation. They must manage to get rid of the wokeism in their guidelines. They must stop all forms of two-tier policing. And I'm worried that we're not going to see that under the present government. I think we're going to need to have a new government that acts probably under Nigel Farage and Zia Youssef with Reform UK, which is going to address these problems seriously, which neither the present government nor the previous government have done.
Well, for better or worse, and I would suggest possibly for worse, 2029 is a long way away. Gary, thank you very much for your time this morning. GB News contacted the National Association for Muslim Police for comment. We're yet to hear back. Still ahead on The Late Show Live.
The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it. And they've done a good job of it, but now I'm president.
Typically blunt, Trump gets it, so why doesn't Starmer? A bombshell new poll has revealed how Brits really feel about Brexit and the Prime Minister's EU reset. Also on the show tonight.
My first duty, the duty above everything else, is to keep our country safe.
MPs have slammed the government's delayed military investment plans and questioned whether Britain's key armoured vehicle is even fit for combat. This is The Late Show Live, only on the People's Channel, GB News.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News breakfast is there.
with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again to start your day just right. GB News breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. I'm Will Kingston. Still ahead, a key ally of President Trump is warning Shabana Mahmood against backdoor spying on Americans and questions whether trust remains between our two countries. The details on that shortly. But first, breaking tonight, MPs on the Public Accounts Committee, which is the House of Commons spending watchdog, have hit out at Sir Keir Starmer's government over the delay in publishing its defence investment plan. Due to be released last year, the long-awaited document may not be published until July. That coincides with the front of the Mail on Sunday, which reports that the Navy's 5 Astute-class submarines are currently laid up awaiting maintenance and other repair work. With me now, Defence Secretary and military analyst Simon Diggins. Simon, thank you for joining me this morning. What can we make of this latest, concern around the delay with the upcoming report, and also these comments that potentially the armed forces and a lot of the military hardware within it is not fit for purpose?
Well, good morning to you. Yeah, I mean, the news is not necessarily very old news. I mean, the pressure for the Defence Investment Plan has been running ever since the Strategic Defence Review in 2025, and it's been continually delayed and delayed and delayed. But there is this NATO summit coming up in July. I think that's now finally persuaded the government they need to come out with something at least which can help defence industry to get itself going. The big issue is going to be how much money is going to be available. We know that from the chiefs that there's a $28 billion £28 billion gap already in our defence procurement. That's without any increases in expenditure at all. And then there's hopefully more money available down the line to actually do something to improve our defences for the long term. So a big ask of the government, and I think that's what's been delaying it rather than anything necessarily on the structural side. They really can't find the money to do it properly at the moment.
Well, unfortunately, Simon, the fiscal position of this country isn't going to improve anytime soon, particularly when this government shows no real willingness to cut spending, and there's only so much they can keep borrowing and taxing. So do you have any confidence, really, that there can be a meaningful increase in defence spending, given that I can't really see where the money could come from at the moment?
Well, Will, you put your finger on the problem. I mean, this is a choice. We've got ourselves in a situation where we're spending over £100 billion a year on debt interest repayment. We're heading towards £400 billion a year on welfare. I mean, and so we are choosing to prioritise those over expenditure on things which led to the debt, and then a high welfare bill. And you'll recall that last year there was an attempt by Labour to have a very minor impact, would have very affected some £4 to £5 billion on the welfare bill, and that was turned down by Labour MPs. So I don't have any great confidence that the serious money that's needed will actually be produced for this. And that has a knock-on effect. Has a knock-on effect on defence industry, has a knock-on effect on morale because equipment's not there. And we're in a really ridiculous and ludicrous situation at the moment whereby our chiefs have been asked to look at cuts, actual cuts in defence capability, simply because we can't afford it and the money's not been made available to them. All at a time when, on the other side, you've got the rhetoric coming from the Prime Minister, coming from the Chief of Defence Staff saying this is the most dangerous era we've been in since at least the Cold War. The two things just do not add up.
Yeah, well, if I'm going to pass some blame perhaps off the government and maybe back at ourselves, if we are to increase defence spending, it will probably mean that you'll need to find cuts somewhere, potentially with welfare. Many people have tried to basically say that is the choice that needs to be made, and you'll get an outcry from people who will lose money. How can the government actually make this argument to say defence spending is so important that people may potentially need to sacrifice, part of their welfare payments in order to achieve it?
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the challenges. I think there's two elements to the challenge. The first element is to say to people, this is a higher priority. And you had a clip earlier on where you had Keir Starmer saying publicly that defence of the country was his highest priority. Well, let's see that rhetoric turn into reality. But the second thing is a moral argument about the money we're spending on welfare anyway. And I'm not obviously an expert on the pensions and everything that goes with that. But there is a reality whereby people can earn more basically being on benefit than they would by working. So there are two aspects to this whole thing. But we've really got to make our minds up. Are we a serious P5 country, member of the Security Council, with supposedly a leading defence role and genuinely interested in securing Europe, or are we not? And I know that's a challenge that the Americans have thrown down a couple of times to us, and currently we're not making that leap.
Yeah, a few weeks ago on a show, I actually listed all of the things that Starmer has said is his top priority, starting with going for growth, then cost of living. I think he said kids at one point, so I'll add defence onto that list. Thank you very much, Simon Diggins, for joining me this morning. Going now to my panel, we'll start in London. Matthew, again, I think we all agree that defence spending needs to be increased and the defence forces aren't where they need to be. How does the government go about doing it?
So I think this is where we do need stronger leadership from Keir Starmer. He needs to be prepared to make some people unhappy and upset. You cannot make everything your priority. So therefore you have to deprioritise some things, or spin it another way. You have to make absolutely sure that if you are determined to cut the welfare budget, you actually make that happen and you get that through with your backbenchers, and that failed clearly last year. Starmer needs to be better at making the argument, but also making decisions. And I do find it depressing that defence, which he has spoken up about passionately and clearly with conviction, that he hasn't so far managed to follow through on that. And all eyes on this report and whether or not the commitments he's already talked about in terms of numbers and spending are actually maintained or watered down.
I agree with everything, Matthew, that you've said, but Benedict, I'll put this in the context of the fact that pretty much everyone believes that the Prime Minister is a dead man walking now and he doesn't have much longer in the job. How does that change this calculus?
Well, that's fine, because whoever it is that ends up replacing him, if somebody else is going to replace him, takes on that mantle. But for the time being, the Prime Minister does soldier on, and there's every chance, actually, he may decide to stand in the leadership contest and fight it out. And frankly,
we have heard that today, that he will fight it.
I think it's slightly underpriced, actually, that he may, in fact, remain as the Prime Minister. I don't think Andy Burnham is the Messiah that many people seem to think that he is. And then if you're left with the options of Keir Starmer or Wes Streeting, you're kind of shrugging your shoulders and going, oh, much of a muchness. But I think, you know, a lot of what Matthew said there is spot on. You do have to make difficult decisions. That's how it is when you're in government. You can't promise everything to anybody and end up giving it to them unless you've got fantastic economic growth. And obviously, that's another area where the government has failed on pretty spectacularly. Successive governments have.
Highest in the G7 first 3 months of this year, no?
Who cares? It's anemic growth. It doesn't matter. When you're comparing it to, you know, sort of how it was sort of 30-odd years ago, 20-odd years ago, it actually doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. You're not creating enough to pay for any of these things. If you want to compare us to other failing economies, fine, but it's irrelevant. But there's something else that needs to be said about all of this, and that is that actually our MOD is not exactly badly funded. It could do with more funding, but it's a pretty highly, furbished one. It's spectacularly bad at spending money. When it comes to things like the relationships between former people who served in the MOD and different companies, who many of those people then go on to work for, and the procurement deals that come along as part of that, we have a very cosy setup between various companies and our armed forces. They repeatedly fail to deliver on their promises. A lot of the stuff that they send us is out of date by the time we get it. It doesn't work. It's overpriced. That, I'm afraid, is as much a part of the problem as anything else. And thank heavens we aren't currently in a war, because if we used the armed forces as much as we do, say, the NHS, people would realise, oh my word, this thing is a bit of a bin fire.
Yeah. Hilary, a quick comment from you?
Well, what would Lord Nelson, Lord Admiral Nelson say? I don't know. But I will say that it will be a very easy solution. Number one, cut all the funding for the illegal migrants. Make it ghastly when they arrive. They shouldn't be in lovely four-star hotels with all the meals, as I mentioned earlier. Cut that funding immediately. That's a lot of money right there. I think that would be a tremendous solution. And also, what's so important is that the Labour government, I don't think any of them have ever been in business. There isn't anything, no such thing as government money. It's the taxpayers' money, the British taxpayer. It's their money. And if they'd been in business, they would understand you have to know how to make payroll, which they don't know. But cut that funding for the migrants. There'd be a lot of money saved there. That could go to the MOD.
Yeah, the UK spends about £3 to £4 billion per year on illegal migrants, so it wouldn't go all the way, but it would help. Greg, a very quick final comment.
Yeah, just Benedict mentioned GDP growth or growing the economy. It's absolutely critical. These Western European welfare states are making commitments to percentages of GDP, but the anemic GDP is not going to drive proper defense spending. So they've got to liberate the private sector and liberate the energy sector.
We will get back to you after the break, Greg, but first, a Ministry of Defence spokesperson said the government is providing generational increases in defence spending with an extra $270 billion across this Parliament, adding the Defence Investment Plan will fix the outdated, overcommitted and underfunded program we inherited. We are working hard to finalise it. As the Defence Secretary told Parliament this week, the Prime Minister is determined to publish it before the NATO summit. Stick with us, ladies and gentlemen. There's much more coming up in the next hour, including this.
Grounded in the job that I'm doing, which is to make sure we are closer to the EU.
Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howard. This is the show where each week we see what's happening in the world of culture, current affairs and politics.
First we'll say, welcome to the UK. Oh, thank you.
And we're not afraid to use our free speech so that you can use yours.
It's not controversial in the slightest to anyone who hasn't lost their mind.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter? So that's a very live question. Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way. You will not want to miss it, trust me.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, Britain. Good evening, America. Hello, wherever you're watching around the world. We are live from London. This is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America. Well, breaking tonight, more shocking revelations out of the Henry Novak cover-up, which is deepening. Police allegedly wanted to portray murdered teenager Henry as the aggressor, before eventually backing down after outrage from his family. In other news, D-Day warning. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth uses his speech in Normandy to warn Europe it's facing a new invasion through mass migration.
Different European beaches are stormed by different dangerous ideologies.
Well, Brexit still means Brexit. Bombshell new polling shows the majority of people do not want to surrender powers back to Brussels, despite these pledges from the PM.
It's in our national interest to be closer to Europe.
There's a new war, this time on woke history. The President Trump orders the removal of what he claims are woke quotes from one of America's oldest war memorials. And breaking in the Gulf, the United States bombs Iranian radar sites and shoots down attack drones heading towards the Strait of Hormuz. So, what happened to this?
They want to make a deal. We've had very good talks over the last 24 hours.
Well over a month ago now. I'm Will Kingston and this is The Late Show Live. Welcome back to The Late Show Live, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying with us. Joining me this evening in London is my panel, political commentators Benedict Spence and Matthew Stadlen. And in Washington, D.C., it is the chair of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson, and political commentator Hilary Fordwich. Thank you for joining us tonight, one and all. Let's bring you some breaking news, which has just entered the GB newsroom in recent minutes. This is extraordinary. The Sun newspaper is reporting that Henry Novak's killer, Vikram Digwa, still had a knife on him even after being arrested and taken to a police station. The kirpan, a Sikh ceremonial dagger worn around the neck, was taken from Digwa only when he was searched before being put into a cell. It means the killer was still armed after he was finally arrested for murdering Henry, who he stabbed 5 times with a separate 8-inch long knife. The murder weapon, which was not a kirpan, was removed from the scene by a family member. A source told the newspaper either the arresting officers knew he had the kirpan on him and let him keep it after the arrest, or they missed it and it was only picked up when he was searched at the police station. Let's go to the panel in London first. Benedict, I'll go with you. Again, this is still information which is emerging in recent minutes, but to me, from the way I read this, there are only 2 possible ways that you can read this. 1, it is gross incompetence, or 2, there was a deliberate decision to keep a knife, albeit a smaller knife, but a knife nonetheless, on someone who they believe to have murdered someone just before. What do you make of this?
I mean, I suppose without knowing what the protocol is around Sikhs in particular being arrested and whether or not they are allowed to keep a hold of their kirpan, it's difficult to know, but I think everybody would quite like to know. That does seem rather relevant, especially given that actually when people are taken into custody, possession of weapons, no matter how small, is something that is taken very seriously, not simply because you might do a mischief to a police officer or to other people in a police station, but also because you might try and do something to yourself. You know, we know full well that great steps are usually taken to prevent people from, say, attempting suicide when they're in police custody as well. So I think without understanding exactly why it is that a Sikh might be allowed to keep a hold of their kirpan in custody, I think it's difficult to say. It's come as news to a lot of people who aren't familiar with Sikhism that actually there is this carve-out, that there is this protected characteristic for Sikhs in the UK. And I suppose actually it's come as a bit of a surprise to people because knife crime amongst Sikhs is vanishingly rare in the grand scheme of things. But I would have thought if people were surprised by that, they will be very surprised to learn that he was allowed to take it with him into a police car, into a police station whilst he was under arrest.
Matthew, your reflections on this breaking news?
Yeah, obviously difficult to get into the minds or the protocols of the officers involved. However, as Benedict suggested, me personally, I had no idea that there was a religious exemption or religious exemptions to the crime of carrying a bladed article in public. And my own view is that there should be no such exemption. We should all be equal under the law when it comes to knives and indeed everything else.
Agreed. Hilary, I'll go to you. And again, we are now in the realms of speculation. I want to make that very clear. This is still breaking news and we will learn more. But as I said, if this isn't what I would suggest is gross incompetence, and it is actually a deliberate exemption to allow him to maintain this item on his person, that surely is yet further evidence of the 2-tier system from which so many people have railed against in the aftermath of that atrocious footage that we saw of Henry's death.
Oh, you're absolutely right, of course, Will. And they're basically, the police are in a lose-lose situation, either vast incompetence or absolute bias and prejudice to allow this to have been kept on his person. I will also make note of the fact that there's a photograph, actually. Bikram was working for an accounting firm, and there was a photograph of the accountant, and he's got this huge knife slashed across his chest. And nobody took exception to that there either. And I think if this was anybody else with a big knife across them, people would be saying, why are you doing this in a professional photograph? I think it should be equal laws, yes, and again, lose-lose for the police. Either way, there is no excuse for this whatsoever.
Yeah, I'm just working with the team to get a better sense of exactly the size of this kirpan, how big it would have been being worn around him. Again, this is not the full-size kirpan which would have been worn hold from a sling and then held around the waist or hip area. It's worn around the neck. But nonetheless, Greg, even if this is a smaller knife, which still could potentially, to the point made earlier by Benedict, either be a risk to himself or a risk to police officers or anyone else he comes into contact with in that police station. This is an extraordinary revelation, whether it is incompetence or whether it is a deliberate decision.
Yeah, it was only an hour ago on this show I said things really couldn't get much worse, and I suppose they have. And so, you know, look, Jennifer Ewing was on GB News earlier today, had a great idea. We Americans could claim that gun ownership is part of our culture and get exemptions and have guns while visiting the UK. So it's pretty outrageous, this idea of an exemption. It's just another example of the policies catering to ethnic minorities at the expense of everybody else. It's pretty outrageous. outrageous.
Yeah, just to jump in there very briefly, I mean, again, it is extraordinary to be lectured by an American on carrying weapons in this country. As I say, we shouldn't be allowed to carry knives. In America, as you suggest, it is part of your culture that in many states you are allowed to carry guns. We in Britain, I'm afraid, we just find that, most of us, completely astonishing. Is it 44,000 gun-related deaths you had in the United States last year? So just forgive me if I take what you say there, Greg, with a pinch of salt.
Greg, right of reply.
No, I don't forgive you, Matthew. It's pretty outrageous that you would do that. And yes, it is part of the culture. 92% of violent crime is committed without guns, by the way. Yes. So there's so many myths that many of you, not just on the left, but also on the right, buy into about gun ownership. And it's a shame. When they outlawed guns in the United Kingdom, homicide rates went up 50% in the next 8 years.
44,000, is that a myth, Greg? That 44,000 figure I just gave you, 44,000 or thereabouts gun-related deaths in the United States.
Greg, I'll give you the right reply, but then I do want to get back. Okay, we can check that. I want to get back to the Henry Novak case at the moment because I am concerned that the police, that the establishment are still trying to deflect in various ways from this tragedy and the lessons that can be learned from it, whether it is deflecting to Nigel Farage or deflecting to Elon Musk or any other number of different topics. Benedict, specifically on this, again, we are still learning more and more stuff which appears to have been, and I'm not going to go as far as saying the words cover up just yet, but this is coming out in drips and drabs from reporting from the Sunday Times, from The Sun. I'm not getting the sense that the Hampshire Police Force is being transparent with the failings that have gone on in this case.
I think, you can almost understand why they wouldn't be transparent, because when we saw the footage for all to see, it was quite clear what had happened. And I think we do have to recognise, and frankly, I think we do recognise, many of us sort of in the political sphere in this country, and it's not just the police, I might say, but many elements of the British state have a culture where actually a murder is almost the default, not saying anything. Another good example, of course, would be the NHS, where there are any numbers of scandals that happen for any number of reasons, and people go, how could nobody have said anything or pointed it out? And it turns out, oh, that's right, because there's a culture of cover-ups in the NHS where whistleblowers are actively punished and gone after. That's very much, I think, also the case in the police. There are incentives for people not to address problems, not to change cultures, just to hope that nothing ever gets discovered. That ultimately is why we get to a position where you have police forces that aren't entirely forthcoming or, frankly, just don't know how to respond to something because they're not sure how much information they should be released.
Just briefly to push back on that, a couple of facts here. One is that the footage, the horrifying footage that has shocked us all and shocked people right across the political spectrum, up and down the land, was released. And it did indeed appear to show that police force, or the officers concerned, in a very poor light, some of them anyway. The second fact is that Henry Novak's parents, his father, said on the steps of the court after the sentencing that, yes, there were certainly serious questions to be answered. However, there were members of that police force who acted brilliantly, as they should, as we should expect, acted brilliantly in securing the conviction of Henry Novak's killer.
A very quick follow-up question, Matthew. Do you think that footage would have been released if it wasn't for Elon Musk and other prominent figures putting huge amounts of pressure on the police force to do so?
I simply can't answer that question. What I will say is that I believe this week Elon Musk tweeted that a police officer who was not in the country on the night of that arrest, he asked when that police officer would be put behind bars. And that goes to Greg's point earlier when he was talking about mis and disinformation here. A major social media channel that does indeed have influence on politics in this country and around the world is run and owned by someone who spreads dangerous misinformation and quite possibly disinformation.
Hillary, I'll go to you, and I'll ask the same question actually. Do you think that that footage would have been released if it wasn't for the intervention of Musk and again some other people on social media? And B, more generally, do you think we would be talking about this story at least to the same extent if it wasn't from interventions from prominent people on social media, with Elon Musk being the leading figure?
Well, nobody can actually give the answer that would be definitive. However, my speculation is absolutely not, because, Will, it's the pressure, it's the social pressure, it's the social uprising. It isn't just what they've said, it's because of what they've sparked in people. I think, as I mentioned before about this being sort of like the last straw, it's because it isn't an isolated incident. This comes on the heels of so many other issues like this, so many other incidents, and I think that's what has happened. It's really just sort of like lit the flame underneath this tinderbox of this disgraceful two-tier Keir England, and that's what he's pointing a finger at. And I don't believe that if he hadn't said anything, I don't believe that this would have been on the radar screen as it has. And actually, it wasn't initially mentioned much in the US media, but because of what Elon Musk has said and because it was taken up internationally, it has now appeared in the US media, and so it's reverberated around the world. That certainly wouldn't have happened without his intervention.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also agree, Greg, that we would be possibly not even speaking, or at least speaking far less about the rape gang scandal in this country if it wasn't for Musk. Still, to Matthew's point, there are some prominent misfires. You know, to the one he just mentioned, I think about the Thai cave diver back in 2018, around that time, where there was just unforgivable slander against a hero in that instance who saved however 13 Thai boys' lives. So on balance, do you think the interventions of Musk put him in the positive or negative category?
Yeah, it's a net positive for sure. And remember, Twitter, only 6 years ago, Twitter was censoring information. If you said anything negative about Hunter Biden or Joe Biden, if you said anything about the Great Barrington Declaration, which was proven right, you were censored from Twitter and other social media companies. Yeah, if you mentioned anything about how masks don't work and children shouldn't be vaccinated, you were taken down. So, you know, I think he's been quite a liberator for free speech.
Oh, we could continue on that, and we may well later, but I want to move on now because there is a GB News alert. New polling has found that the majority of British people do not want to undo Brexit rules. Campaign group Britain Unbound has found almost 60% of people would not be willing to accept fewer rule-making powers in exchange for more access to the EU single market. Conversely, about 27% said that they would be willing to give up British sovereignty for increased single market access. This new survey comes as the Prime Minister has unveiled plans to move Britain increasingly closer to the trading bloc, and potential Labor leadership candidates Wes Streeting and Andy Burnham have each at some point stated their intention to rejoin the European Union. So is this survey the latest sign that those who still harbour ambitions to rejoin the EU are out of step with public opinion? With me now, former Conservative Minister Tom Pursglove. Tom, thank you very much for joining me. Even as I was reading through this story earlier, I was reminded that you can get pretty much whatever answer you want out of a survey depending on how you frame the wording of the survey. I'll make that a caveat to what we are saying. At the same time, do you think that this is a credible message that the people still have some faith in the Brexit project?
Most definitely, and I think the British public as a whole are far more sensible than the rejoiner cabal who are desperate to drag us back into the European Union and everything that would mean. And of course, rejoining the European Union would not be the same as the European Union that we left, in the sense of, you know, there'd be no rebate. Things like Schengen would probably be on the table. But also you've got things like the single currency, which would be a requirement. And it would involve frittering away all of those Brexit opportunities that we ought to be capitalising on. We ought to be going after where the future global growth is at. That's why our membership of the CPTPP is so important from a trading perspective. And it's that sort of thing, going after AI, technological breakthroughs, being at the forefront of that. The same with regard to agri-tech. We don't pay into the EU budget in the same way anymore, tens of billions of pounds a year. We've got the ability to control our own borders. Those are exactly the sorts of freedoms that I think the British people wanted. They also just do not want to reopen all of the rancour of those debates that went on for an endless amount of time.
It's interesting, though, Tom, how you framed that answer. You framed it as potential in many instances, as opportunities. And this is coming despite the fact that we have had Brexit for some time now. It leads me to think, and I don't think this is a controversial comment, that that Brexit has not been implemented in the way that so many people would have hoped. That is primarily, I would argue, as a result of the former Conservative government, many of whom did not believe in the Brexit project. So if we haven't been able to get the Brexit that so many people wanted up until now? What gives you the confidence that all of those opportunities that you just mentioned can be realised in the future?
Well, we know what the instincts of this government look like, and I think there were certain Brexit benefits that took some time to come to fruition. I mean, a good example of that was that eventually I was able to pull the levers that have allowed net migration numbers to come down very considerably. There's still more to do, but that is a change that we've been able to do because of
Tom,
Brexit.
Many people would argue that's because relatively high earners are heading off to Dubai, and you're getting you're getting a lower number of people who are native to the country here as a result. That's the net part.
Well, there's still a long way to go on that, and I always said that that would be the first steps that would need to be taken. But actually, visa numbers, when you look at things like dependents, when you look at skilled worker visas, those numbers are down, and that's important. But there's also a whole host of other things. From a Labour government's perspective, they're talking about renationalising the steel industry. You would not be able to do that as a member of the European Union. So that is something that a socialist government in this country is able to do because we're outside of the European Union. We've also grown since 2016, more significantly than Italy, than France. We've grown double the growth that we've seen in Germany. So actually, we've seen benefits from this already, as well as signing those trade agreements, as well as not paying in those billions of pounds into the EU budget. So I think there's a lot of success stories in there that Brexit has been able to deliver for the British people. We need to be making the positive case for it, though, and I think being ambitious for that is something that voters will want to see. But I certainly don't think voters want to relive all the Brexit wars and reopening that great debate and all the rancour that it brought for such a long time.
On that, I think it's fair to say most of our viewers and listeners agree with you. Tom, thank you very much for your time this morning. Benedict, I'll go to you first in London. Do you think that this survey is a fair reflection of the public mood, or do you think there is a bit of survey, chicanery going on here?
I think whenever you survey people about Brexit, whatever angle it is, nobody is ever being honest, because you can get polling that says, oh, X, Y, Z number of people say it was a mistake or that they want to rejoin, or the opposite, they say they'd still vote to leave today. The reality is the Brexit that we have today is a different, what we ended up with, rather, is a certain set of circumstances which meant the end of an arrangement with the European Union. If we were to rejoin the European Union, it would be under different terms, it would be a different deal, it would be a different negotiation. So it depends entirely how you're framing it. Are you looking at EU membership as it was before, or as it would be later? And none of these polls ever really seem to dive into that. And I do think it's actually pointless, therefore, to ask people about our relationship with Europe, given we don't know what it would look like. Ultimately, I think the conversation about Brexit is a lot of displacement activity, largely because of political ineptitude, first from the Conservatives and now the Labour Party, finding it also very difficult to govern, which is why they're now starting to talk about our relationship with Europe. In many ways, that's how we ended up with Brexit in the first place, because you had mass political displacement, lots of politicians saying, this is the problem, this is how we fix it. The public voted to do that, to fix it, and the politicians went, oh, well, we didn't want you to do that, but now you've done it, we're going to have to just muddle through like it never happened. And that's ultimately where I stand on all of this. Keep on polling people on where they stand on Brexit. You'll get different answers based on how you phrase it, but none of these polls are ever honest about what it is that our EU relationship would look like.
Matthew?
Yeah, I think if we were to try to rejoin, it would very likely be on different terms and less favourable terms. I voted for Remain more with my head than my heart. I could see that there were reasons, certainly emotional ones, for voting Leave. Do I think the country's become better as a consequence of voting out? The country voting out? Absolutely not. Right from the beginning, and on the national radio shows that I presented in the aftermath of Brexit, I was very clear we should not have a second referendum. It would have been thumbing the nose at millions and millions of people in this country, arguably the biggest exercise in democracy we have ever had. Do I think we should rejoin now? No. Do I think we are going to rejoin now? No. I do think, Will, you made a good point earlier, it's about the question, partly about the question that you asked, because if you look at this YouGov research that I've been looking at from May, Britain rejoining the European Union support, this is of all Britons, 56% opposed, 35%, and very quickly, Britain having a closer relationship with the EU, but importantly, without rejoining the European Union, the single market or the customs union, 70% of all Britons support that idea, 17 opposed. So look, there is generally, I think, a sense that things have not been going particularly well. I think there is a desire to grow closer, but grow closer cautiously.
Yeah, Hillary, when I hear about people who are despondent about the way that the Brexit project has been implemented, sometimes I feel that Brexit is now just a convenient excuse for the litany of problems that the country is facing. You know, if you have an issue with the economy, if you have an issue with immigration, if you have an issue with the NHS, it all just comes back to Brexit for the newsagents class. Do you think that this sort of survey suggests that there is still, from the base, I guess you'd say, support for the Brexit project?
Well, it looks like you can't really tell, can you? Because, as you mentioned, it was the other type of question you can ask. Which way do you ask it? How do you ask the question? But I think the most important factor, though, Will, is that Brexit, as it was intended, has never actually really been implemented because the civil servants didn't ever want it. And I think you've got too many globalists thwarting actual Brexit. So I don't think that it can be a true vote either one way or the other, or any opinion can be one way or the other, because it's never been implemented. That's the issue at hand.
Greg, this is an interesting point that Hillary makes about the administrative state that has grown in the United Kingdom, and it's basically thwarting of the democratic agenda of successive governments now. Now, there are different systems, of course, in the United Kingdom and the United States, but I think that is an analogous problem that both countries have, which is why Trump's whole agenda was drain the swamp. So I'll ask you actually, a double-barreled question. Number one, do you think Donald Trump has drained the swamp in the United States as he promised? And number two, do you think there are any lessons from the United States experience as someone like, say, a Nigel Farage or potentially a Kemi Badenoch gets in and tries to reduce the power of the Quangos and the administrative state in the United Kingdom?
So, Will, great question. The answer is absolutely yes. It's worked. Only 18 months into this administration, there are 325,000 fewer federal jobs. So the government payrolls are shrinking, and guess what? Private payrolls are going crazy. So this is what the UK can learn, is that if you shrink government, get rid of some of those bureaucrats, reduce regulation and the regulatory burden on job creators and wealth creators, then you'll have really great outcomes. And that's really obvious. It's working, and it will continue to work.
Benedict, in the UK, I know that Danny Kruger for Reform is putting a lot of thinking into how you solve this problem. You have people like David Starkey talking about a great repeal bill. How much confidence do you have that a future government can actually address the bloated nature of the administrative state in this country?
Well, I mean, a government has the power to. The Prime Minister absolutely has the power to undo all sorts of things, and if he has a majority with which to pass legislation in the House of Commons, it ought to be a straightforward thing. The concern is not necessarily whether or not a government can, it's whether or not a government actually would like to. I worry about reform. I'm constantly sort of looking at it and thinking it has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do really interesting, bold, dynamic things. And then I look at the people that are involved in the administration, and there are a few people who are very smart and very interesting thinkers. You know, Danny Kruger's one, and people within his team are interesting as well. But those aren't necessarily the people pulling the levers. Those aren't necessarily the people making the decisions. And then you see other people in the party. And of course, this is partly why Reform is losing a lot of support amongst what should be its core voters. They see lots of former Tories who are less impressive than Danny Kruger, taking up positions in the party, joining, and they go, is this actually going to be the thing that reforms anything, or is it just going to be the same old circus, but in turquoise rather than blue? And that's my concern with Reform.
OK, well, let me know your thoughts by visiting gbnews.com/your say. Still ahead on The Late Show Live.
But I will not say with confidence that we're going to reach a deal until we're actually signing a negotiated settlement here.
That was, of course, JD Vance. There are major developments in the Iran war, and it looks like things may have taken a significant turn from the peace talks that were previously being touted. But also tonight, As anti-immigration enforcement protests continue to rock America, the White House has just been dealt a significant blow. We'll discuss all that coming up on The Late Show Live on the People's Channel, GB News. President Trump's administration has sought to remove what it calls 3 woke quotas from a 200-year-old monument. Perhaps woke's been going a bit longer than I thought. Quotes linked to slavery and anti-war activism are to be erased from the Boston Monument after they fell foul of President Trump's push to remove any traces of so-called corrosive ideology from federal institutions. Among the quotes are, "We find upon reflection that our duty to our country has not ended. We as Vietnam veterans strongly feel that the United States should cease to build memorials to death and begin to glorify life." Another one reads, "As we drew near to Boston, there stood Bunker Hill Monument, towering up towards the heavens as if in silent, bitter mockery of the millions of slaves guarded by the professed lovers of liberty who reared its lofty column." And the third reads, "Now that a public orator has declared that foreign-born men have no association with the men of the revolution, it is our duty to show that in love of freedom and loyalty to the Republic, the citizens of foreign birth take no second place." With me now to discuss this, foreign correspondent Sarah Firth. Sarah, thanks for your time. Is Trump right in calling out these so-called woke quotes on this particularly august monument?
Well, it's proving really controversial. Look, this is the monument and the memorial for Bunker Hill. Now, that was the 1775 battle for Bunker Hill. And that was basically, it was one of the first major revolutionary conflicts. For the GB News viewers, and I'm sure there's many historians among them, will know that actually the British won that particular fight, but it was seen as a major symbol of American resistance and sacrifice. So now these quotes are hanging on banners inside the Bunker Hill Lodge, which is next to that monument. And as you said, you read them out there. There are 3 quotes that we're being told that the National Park Service will be erasing. So that first one, written in 1971 by a Vietnam veteran denouncing the war. You've got the 1875 quote celebrating immigrants, as you said, quote, "The citizens of foreign birth take no second place," an important one for me as a Brit in America. And also a quote on the hypocrisy of having a monument next to the statue that represents liberty while owning slaves. Now, for critics of this, they are saying, look, you can't erase history. It was documented at the time. This is a part of American history. Some critics going as far as saying, look, this is censorship. The White House, the Trump administration, as you said, have pushed back on that. Now, the Interior Department here, they say the president has encouraged Americans to visit its historic sites and learn the truth about the country's stories. So they're saying this is about representing America, doing a refresh of what's on display. As we said, though, the critics are denouncing that, saying you shouldn't be erasing words that are part of America's history.
Yeah, so Sarah, I think whenever you go to some sort of museum, whether it be in the United Kingdom or America now, or indeed a gallery, you will see very often particular little comments, quotes, additions to established artworks or to pieces which put the history in, inverted commas, context, and it will generally look at, oppressed minority groups, for example, or particular social justice topics. It doesn't sound like this is quite the case here, because the quotes that have been included on the monument have been around for respectively since the 1970s and the 1800s. It's not like some curator in 2022 decided to put in these quotes. These actually have become part of the fabric of the monument, haven't they?
Yes, they have, and I think that's one of the arguments, and certainly in the area around the monument, the locals there who've been turning out to visit and taking photos of those quotes. We don't know exactly when the banners will be removed. But I've been listening pretty much all day to the Americans around there talking about what that monument means to them, what the quotes mean to them, and why they feel so aggrieved about the idea of it being removed. Again, you know, you're absolutely right. Around the world, I mean, in Britain, again, this is one for our GB News viewers. Maybe they can write in and tell us. I don't know if there's been the equivalent in Britain where I know there's been discussions and controversies around various historical figures. What is interesting is here in America, not only has there been controversy, but when you had previous administrations and Democratic administrations, they were looking, especially in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, they wanted statues that commemorated members who were seen as having a poor track record when it came to racism, that were deemed offensive to be celebrating some of these figures. It caused uproar, particularly amongst the right here in America and amongst conservatives. Well, now it's the conservatives' turn to be saying they want to be removing, refreshing, however you phrase it, certain, as President Trump has said, woke elements of America's history. The principle's the same, right? Both sides have argued that there shouldn't be this censorship, that these words, these quotes, they are a part of the fabric of America's history and culture, and it's important that they remain. So both sides have the same argument. It's just depending on which administration's in power as to which quotes, statues are being removed. So it's a controversial situation for sure. It'll be very interesting to see if there is any kind of a reversal, or if the Trump administration does indeed push ahead with this. Of course, we're in the 250th year of American independence. It's a huge year for the US. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch how this one plays out.
And Sarah, we'll of course be connecting with you as those celebrations go on. Thank you for joining us. I'll go to our panel in Washington, DC. Hillary, when Trump was inaugurated, the term vibe shift was used. A lot of people were incredibly excited to see a very deliberate and conscious pushback, admittedly mainly through executive, or exclusively through executive actions against so-called woke policies, against DEI. Is there still a feeling of a vibe shift, or is the sort of culture wars stuff that the administration took on, has that slightly fallen down the public consciousness and their priorities?
Well, certainly I will say, well, yes, it's down the public consciousness, because right now I would say what's so prevalent in the US is obviously what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz, with the price of gas. That's what people care about. It's called gas here, not petrol, even though it actually is petroleum. The price of gas is what's of main concern. And I will say, with the midterms looming, if I had any advice for the administration, it would be the price of gas, because every single election, it literally, you can link, there's a direct correlation between the price of gas, what people put in their car, and who is elected or not elected. So that's very, very important. That's top of mind. And people who most unfortunately aren't watching GB News, they're not watching the news, they're not reading certainly newspapers anymore. Maybe they're listening to music. They don't know what's going on. They certainly know the price of gas. So I think that's primarily on the top of people's mind. But if I might add, Will, with regard to those monuments and this sort of, you know, the woke wording being taken down throughout the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., which was actually donated by an Englishman, John Smithson. But the Smithsonian museums, you go into any of them, there is a woke take on absolutely everything. It is pervasive through the museums. It is pervasive through the educational system. It is pervasive throughout our society. Yeah. And I don't think actually that's been an emphasis of this administration, or President Trump has been able to make a big dent.
Yeah. Greg, on Hillary's observation that really the price of gas is the primary motivator for voters in the United States, some would argue that this sort of stuff, and don't get me wrong, I'm all for stripping woke out of the institutions, but this is less important, and Trump is now getting diverted from the bread and butter issues towards stuff like this, towards stuff like, you know, putting himself on the $250 bill, the ballroom he keeps going on about, the reflective pool that he's filling up. You know, are these all distractions from the big issues?
Well, yeah, I think they can be. I mean, there's always going to be priorities. As I mentioned earlier, the priorities for voters in Western Europe are mass migration and cost of living. It's not too dissimilar here. Those are the two issues that President won the election on in 2024. So I think, yeah, there's an argument that there are distractions, but on the other hand, this president is a multitasker. He's got, he sleeps 3 or 4 hours a night. He's going to do a lot of things besides the top issues, or besides addressing the top issues, because he can. And he's also very patriotic. And with the big celebration this year for, with 250 coming only a month away, I think it's really important to him to clean up these monuments. He ripped up day one after the inauguration. They took out BLM Square, which is right in front of the Hay Adams Hotel. Hillary can understand that. And so I think he's very proud of Washington. He's proud of these monuments, and I wish he'd get to the Smithsonian because it's an absolute woke-a-thon.
Well, Matthew, on this point, more generally, do you accept the premise that the left, over a course of a decades perhaps now, have launched a conscious attack on the history of the United States, which Trump is right to try and reverse?
I'm not an expert on that. What I would say is that during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, famously or infamously, the statue of the slave Edward Colston was torn down, wasn't it, in Bristol? And I'm not an absolutist on this. For example, if there were still a statue, which there isn't, in Germany of Hitler, you wouldn't want that upstanding, would you? You would want that to be taken down. However, broadly speaking, I do feel uncomfortable with the tampering with and attempts to rewrite parts of history. And for that to be done by an American president who, in his behaviour, we've seen has a tendency towards behaving a little like a king, I find it even more uncomfortable.
Well, that's all we have time for. Benedict, we'll get to you first when we go to our next topic. Let's take a quick look at some of the other main news in America, though. 3 British men have admitted killing a restaurant owner in Canada, Robert Evans Jr. He pleaded guilty on Friday to the manslaughter of Sharif Rahman after a row over an unpaid restaurant bill in the town of Owen Sound in August 2023. His father and uncle also pleaded guilty to being accessories to the crime and have been sentenced to time already served. Elsewhere, a massive coastal resort development in Albania linked to President Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, has sparked days of protests. Police have fired water cannons and clashed with demonstrators in the capital, Tirana, this week as public anger grows. Plans for the luxury project boast hotels, apartments, villas and a marina across 2 sites, including a wildlife reserve, which is a key stopover for migratory birds, including flamingos. Finally, Canada's Food Inspection Agency has announced a temporary ban on livestock from the US state of Texas after flesh-eating screwworms were discovered in calves this week. Well, still ahead on The Late Show Live, are guns the problem or the protection? Because tonight, one Democrat-led state appears to be facing the law of unintended consequences after plans to ban assault weapons. Matthew on the panel has already discussed guns, and it's interesting to get his thoughts later on. But first tonight,
they want to make a deal. We've had very good talks over the last 24 hours.
that was President Trump a few weeks ago. So why is America back striking Iranian sites? And is a ceasefire really still in place? This is The Late Show Live. It's your weather coming up only on GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, Sunday promises to be a warmer day for most of us, particularly in the east, where we should hold on to some hazy sunshine. But it's a different story in the north and west, where we'll continue to see some outbreaks of rain at times, particularly this morning across Northern Ireland and into the early part of the afternoon. The rain quite heavy also for parts of central and western Scotland too. Tending to turn a little bit damper across northwest England, parts of Wales into this afternoon, but the rain here somewhat lighter overall. The best of the weather, generally speaking, across more central and eastern parts of England. Here temperatures could well rise into the low 20s quite widely, and there will continue to be some spells of hazy sunshine, indeed into this evening too. So parts of East Anglia and the south east should actually have a fine end to the weekend and still relatively warm as well. Further west though, the cloud will be always thickening through the course of the afternoon, so southwest England will see a few outbreaks of light rain and turning increasingly damp this evening for Wales. the Pennine regions, and some quite heavy bursts of rain shown here by these red colours, just clearing out from Northern Ireland. A bit of a showery end to the weekend also for most of Scotland, but a bright end to Sunday for the North West Highlands, where there'll be some evening sunshine. Then there'll be a few showers overnight for the northwest, but the most persistent rain will gradually shift its way from Scotland and Northern Ireland into England and Wales. Still quite showery initially, but some quite heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain pushing into northwest England and Wales, shown here by these yellow colours by the end of the night. But a mild night to come for England and Wales, 13s and 14s, the minimum temperatures for many. A much chillier start to Monday in the northwest. So in northwest Scotland, sunshine from the word go on Monday, sunnier skies with a few showers for Northern Ireland too, and these brighter skies chasing that rain band eastwards, but a wet day to come for many parts of England and Wales, particularly in the east, with some fairly heavy bursts of rain continuing into the afternoon. Brightening up in the west and feeling pleasant in any sunshine, highs of 16 or 17 degrees, but generally a much cooler day to come compared to yesterday.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Zero illegal aliens have been allowed into our country, a feat which everyone said was absolutely impossible.
Welcome back. President Trump's no asylum policy has been halted as a judge rules the White House has an anti-immigrant animus. That's coming up shortly. But first, the United States Central Command says it has successfully shot down 4 Iranian drones that were bound for the disputed Strait of Hormuz, as well as targeting radar sites in the Islamic Republic. They eliminated the attack drones, saying they were an immediate threat to regional maritime traffic in what is the largest skirmish amidst the fragile ceasefire. Iran also launched a salvo against 2 US bases in Kuwait, as well as naval sites in Bahrain. According to US forces, 6 of the 7 missiles were intercepted, whilst the remaining launch failed to meet its target. So, with a ceasefire in place since April 8th, just what impact could these periodic bouts of violence have on any potential lasting resolution to the conflict? With me now, Editor-in-Chief at the Foreign Desk and friend of the show, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, lovely to see you again. I hate to be a stickler for language, but my understanding is a ceasefire basically means the fighting stops. And the fighting hasn't stopped. So why are we kidding ourselves with this pretense that there's still a ceasefire in place?
I absolutely agree with you. I am a stickler for grammar and for verbiage. So I actually have said that from the beginning. I don't think we should have entered into a ceasefire while chasing diplomacy. We could have done both at the same time, meaning try to strike a deal while continuing on with the pressure militarily, because that's the language that this regime understands, and we would have had a better chance perhaps at getting some sort of concession, or at least behavioral change in the interim. The bottom line is this: if you're looking at a regime that is losing 500 million a day, that has been degraded to a certain extent in terms of its nuclear portfolio, in terms of its drones and its missiles, in terms of its navy, in terms of its army, in terms of the heads of state, its supreme leader, many of them eliminated. This is not the behavior you would see from that sort of vulnerability. Somebody who actually wants to play along? Nope, we're not seeing that. Somebody who wants to make a deal? No, we're just seeing more of the same rogue rhetoric. We're seeing a lot of that chest thumping, because this is what we are going to get. We are giving them time and space to do more of the same. And what are they looking for? If you're following the exact specifics, they are pushing for money and sanctions relief before they agree to anything else. Donald Trump is not President Obama. He's not President Biden. And this is very different than the JCPOA. None of that will be released ahead of time until we see some sort of behavioral and actionable change from this regime. And we're not going to see that. We can see that based on the last 90 days.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about this very practically, because as we know, the US absolutely destroyed the senior leadership layers of the Iranian regime at the outset of the war. My understanding now is that it is a much more decentralised Iranian leadership structure. I imagine it is very possible that you can have some drones being flown out from different groups within the Iranian state, and potentially the people who are responsible for negotiating with the US would have had no idea about this. As I said, I'm just speculating. But what is the kind of the pragmatic side of how this is actually playing out? How do you respond to I guess, that potential scenario?
Right. So they are absolutely fractured in terms of their government, but that doesn't mean that they're not on the same page with regards to their approach. Right. So I think that is the kind of the feeling they want to give off to the West, is that we're fractured. You know, we don't know if there's going to be a reformist to rise up. We don't know if he's going to be a hardliner. They are all hardliners, and they agree on death to America, death to Israel, and the continuation of the ideology that has kept them in power for 47 years. That is very clear. We should not waste our time worrying about who's on top, or if Mojtaba Khamenei is alive, or to what capacity he's involved, or who's the one doing the negotiating. Anybody who is in this government had to pass certain criteria in order to be there from the supreme leader, so they're all cut from the same cloth. That's number one. Number two is to understand that ideology and what it is that they want and what they have done for the past 47 years, not just in killing Iranians in Iran, not just in exporting that brand of radicalized Shiite Islam into the region, but really exporting it all throughout the world. Look at Europe, look at Central America and South America, look at the United States. Their narrative warfare has reached our soil here in the United States as well. So when we start to compartmentalize this, are we looking at Hezbollah and a deal between Lebanon and Israel? Are we looking at their enrichment of uranium and the nuclear portfolio? All of it is under the same umbrella of the ideology of this regime that has kept them in power. It's what they hope to do for the next 5 decades. So the analogy I'm using over and over again is, it's not the car or the tequila, it's the drunk driver. It is the regime that is the root of the problem.
Yeah, Lisa Daftari, pleasure as always. Let's go now to my panel. We'll start in the United States as a more directly American issue. Hillary, I'll go to you first. What are your reflections on where we stand with this conflict today?
Well, the problem is we have the midterms coming up, and the Iranians know that. They know that we're under a time crunch. They have absolutely no incentive to do anything immediately, except for economic fury was working at some juncture. What they care about is they care about themselves. They don't care about their people. They killed 42,000 of their own people. So sadly to say, any bombing, any destruction of the nation, that isn't what they care about. They're hunkered down. So I do think seizing their cryptocurrencies is very important. Seizing their properties across the world, not the least of which is London and I believe in southern France, but seizing their properties, their Bitcoin, and putting economic pressure on the leadership now, that is what is going to have some kind of impact. Because where do we stand, Will? We stand obviously at a stalemate. Nothing is going to happen, but they only care about themselves, their financial well-being and their futures. That's who we have to go after. So I actually don't think it's a big military operation. It's very targeted and it's very financial. Economic fury against those leaders. That's all I can see is going to make a difference, because we have to have something done by the summer and they know it.
Matthew, how much confidence would you have in that sort of strategy actually working?
Well, there's not much point in complaining about the Iranian regime. I mean, that was priced in from the beginning, or should have been, that they're a terrorist regime. You said, Will, a moment ago that this is more a directly American issue. Well, of course, it's a massively British issue as well. Not just because clearly we don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon, whether or not they are going to be, after this ends in some form, closer or further away from a desire to build a nuclear weapon and a capability of developing a nuclear weapon, we can't yet say for sure. But the prices at the pump are so significant. They are still about 30p more for unleaded petrol, something I use regularly, than they were at the start of the war here in Britain. In America, as I understand it, fuel prices have risen as well. As far as the direct impact on the American electorate is concerned, and on Republican politicians at the midterms, my suspicion is that they are in quite significant trouble.
Yeah, Benedict, my understanding is that the forecast at this stage is for them to lose the House, which, again, it is at midterms. That was always going to be a potential problem. The Senate is very contentious at the moment. I've heard people say that it could go either way. How do you feel about where the conflict stands and the political ramifications within the United States?
I mean, the conflict itself was an inevitable conflict, and I think that people sort of forget about this, because for as long as Iran was pursuing nuclear weapons, which it officially denied, but It officially denies it in the same way that Israel officially denies having nuclear weapons, but everybody knows it has. For as long as it was going to pursue that, there was always going to be an existential conflict between Israel and Iran. And if Israel were to get involved in that conflict, ironically, the United States was then going to be drawn in a way to try to temper what Israel did to try to prevent the use of nuclear weapons in that conflict, because the United States does not want a world in which nuclear weapons are being thrown about by smaller states, or where they are actively succeeding in getting them. So this was an inevitable conflict, and Donald Trump's attempts to sort of win it in a very sort of limited capacity, so to speak, by using almost entirely air support, air resources and naval resources, and not committing to a ground offensive, was always very unlikely to succeed. Now, we all understand why he didn't want a ground invasion. That would have been politically incredibly difficult. It would have lost huge numbers of lives. But if you want to unseat a regime like the Iranians in a shorter space of time, that was going to have to be what you did, and that's not what he did. So what he's going to end up doing, as you say, is reaping an awful lot of political pain over the rest of his administration for not actually going in with full might, because that's now going to leave the Iranians in place. Yeah. And even if they do sign a ceasefire at some point, eventually when the Iranians start back their nuclear process, which they will, that conflict will start all over again.
Greg, I want your thoughts specifically on the political ramifications in the US and how they will shape the dynamics leading into the midterms.
Yeah, I'm sure that it will. I mean, obviously, higher gas prices are meaningful here, and our percentage increase in fuel prices for automobiles is actually more dramatic than it is in Europe, because we have so much less tax. So granted, our prices are much lower because we actually produce and refine, but also, you know, we don't have the tax burden that you do in Western Europe. So the percentage increase has been more painful on American consumers. On the other hand, natural gas prices are actually lower than they were before the start of the conflict. We're at a 17-month low on nat gas. And so, but will it have an effect? Of course it will. And Will, as you pointed out, midterms for the party in power are always really difficult. And so I'm already baking in the loss. The question is, how bad is the loss? And this and the conflict, if we still have gas at $4.50 a gallon, it's going to be bad.
When you say lost, are you
back to $3.50 a gallon, we'll be good.
When you say lost, very quickly, are you suggesting the House and the Senate?
No, the map is really good for the Senate. It doesn't mean that they're polling well, and it doesn't mean that there's some, negative sentiment for the party. But absolutely, the House, I think, will go, but the Senate will stay.
Still ahead on The Late Show Live, are guns the problem or protection? Because tonight, one Democrat-led state appears to be facing the law of unintended consequences after a plan to ban assault weapons. That's coming up on The Late Show Live after your weather.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, Sunday promises to be a warmer day for most of us, particularly in the east, where we should hold on to some hazy sunshine. But it's a different story in the north and the west, where we'll continue to see some outbreaks of rain at times, particularly this morning across Northern Ireland and into the early part of the afternoon. The rain quite heavy also for parts of central and western Scotland too. Tending to turn a little bit damper across northwest England, parts of Wales into this afternoon, but the rain here somewhat lighter overall. The best of the weather, generally speaking, across more central and eastern parts of England. Here, temperatures could well rise into the low 20s quite widely, and there will continue to be some spells of hazy sunshine, indeed into this evening too. So parts of East Anglia and the south east should actually have a fine end to the weekend and still relatively warm as well. Further west, though, the cloud will be always thickening through the course of the afternoon, so southwest England will see a few outbreaks of light rain and turning increasingly damp this evening for Wales, the Pennine regions, and some quite heavy bursts of rain shown here by these red colours, just clearing out from Northern Ireland. A bit of a showery end to the weekend also for most of Scotland, but a bright end to Sunday for the Northwest Highlands, where there'll be some evening sunshine. Then there'll be a few showers overnight for the northwest, but the most persistent rain will gradually shift its way from Scotland and Northern Ireland into England and Wales. Still quite showery initially, but some quite heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain pushing into northwest England and Wales, shown here by these yellow colours by the end of the night. But a mild night to come for England and Wales, 13s and 14s, the minimum temperatures for many. A much chillier start to Monday in the northwest. So in northwest Scotland, sunshine from the word go on Monday, sunnier skies with a few showers for Northern Ireland too, and these brighter skies chasing that rain band eastwards, but a wet day to come for many parts of England and Wales, particularly in the east with some fairly heavy bursts of rain continuing into the afternoon. Brightening up in the west and feeling pleasant in any sunshine, highs of 16 or 17 degrees, but generally a much cooler day to come compared to yesterday.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray, are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it. Don't get us on the BBC. Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines. The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos. What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dordme, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there. With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start. No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter? So that's a very live question. Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way.
You will not want to miss it, trust me. The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Good morning, Britain. Good evening, America. Hello, wherever you are watching around the world. We are live from London. This is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America. Well, breaking tonight, the Henry Novak cover-up row deepens. Police allegedly wanted to portray murdered teenager Henry as the aggressor before backing down after outrage from his family. This is hitting a nerve across the country and across the world. When I put out a tease to say we would be discussing this on social media earlier, everyone from Elon Musk to Lucy Connolly has liked that tweet. It is touching the soul of the nation and the United States as well. Equally, in the Sun newspaper reports his killer, Vikram Digwa, still had a knife on him after being arrested and taken to a police station. Also breaking tonight, Sir Keir Starmer will fight any leadership election against Andy Burnham as the government makes its clearest move yet that they are in a full-blown crisis.
Prime Minister's your time up! Have you lost the country, Prime Minister? Is your term over? Are you finished, Mr Starmer?
And of course is the inimitable Keith Bayes. Well, separately, D-Day warning. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth uses speech in Normandy to warn Europe it's facing a new invasion through mass migration.
Different European beaches are stormed by different dangerous ideologies.
Well, we have an immigration showdown. President Trump's no asylum policy is halted as a judge rules the White House has an anti-immigrant animus.
0 illegal aliens have been allowed into our country, a feat which everyone said was absolutely impossible.
And finally, a top Trump ally warns Shabana Mahmood against spying on Americans and questions the trust between America and the UK. I'm Will Kingston and this is The Late Show Live. Welcome back to The Late Show Live. Wherever you are watching, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. Well, we have a wonderful panel this evening. Who is sticking with me? We're in London, Benedict Spence and Matthew Stadlen. And of course, in Washington, we have Greg Swenson and Hilary Fordwich. Thank you for joining me, one and all. Well, a GB News alert this hour. A judge has struck down President Trump's travel ban and other policies used to target immigrants, saying the administration had exhibited anti-immigrant animus. The ruling goes on to say the lives of countless people had been put on hold solely by virtue of their countries of birth. The outcome follows a decision in 2025 by the Trump administration, which indefinitely paused asylum adjudications and immigration applications for people who fell under the travel ban. The 39 countries affected are mostly in Africa and the Middle East. The freeze was enacted after the shooting of two National Guard soldiers dispatched to Washington as part of Mr. Trump's declared effort to reduce crime in the capital. Let's go to my panel, and I'm going to start in DC. Greg, I'll go to you first because this isn't the first time that the Trump administration has been frustrated by a judge who they would claim is getting in the way of the will of the people. No doubt they would probably suggest that there are particular Liberal judges that are frustrating the efforts of the Trump administration to implement their agenda. Is that the case, or is this a fair and a fair use of judicial power?
No, it's definitely the case, Will. And look, the conservative judges aren't necessarily ruling in conservative political ways. They rule based on the Constitution or by precedent. So they will just judge whether a particular law or the execution of a law is constitutional. So you could call them constitutionalists, but not really conservatives. Whereas the liberal judges, they try to legislate from the bench. So we do have balance of power, but the idea is that judges should opine but not legislate from the bench. If you want to change the rules and make it difficult or impossible for the president to execute those types of decisions, well, then go to Congress and change the law. And that's the problem, is they haven't changed the law. Now, Biden chose not to enforce the law, which was that illegal migrants cannot just walk into the country and stay in the country. But I think the president is just executing the law. When Barack Obama did the same thing, and he basically said, you know, we're stopping immigration from, I think it was 4 or 5 countries, and they were ironically 4 out of the 7 that President Trump put on the list back in 2017. So, you know, the president is in the executive branch. His job is to execute the law. It's these activist judges that are trying to legislate from the bench because they don't like the law.
Following up on that, would it have been harder for so-called activist judges to legislate from the bench if Trump went via Congress as opposed to governing via by executive order?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I wish that he would go to Congress more, because a lot of these executive orders can be easily reversed when a leftist president takes office, and so that's something that worries all of us. It's always good to go to Congress to codify things and make that law permanent, but in this case, it's not. He has that right to change the countries or pick the countries. He's just executing the law that Congress has already passed.
Hillary, what do you make of it?
Well, actually, to the point that Greg just made, they should be going to Congress if they want to change law. They shouldn't be legislating from the bench. What I actually would say is something that's, sorry, I think it comes from every American's heart, which is if they really, really don't want those illegals to be here, they're saying that they should be here, and they don't want them in these detention centres, why don't they house them in their own homes? They're legislating from the bench, and they're also not looking at the average American and what the average American cares about, which is in their towns with the high level of crime that we have. And they're saying, oh, we actually don't want them, but you're not allowed to send them back. They're not listening to the public. The public voted President Trump in on the platform to shut the border, close the border, make this nation more safe, and actually to deport criminals. So they're legislating something that is not the will of the American public.
Matthew, is this frustrating the democratic will of the people?
Well, it's actually quite a difficult area and a difficult balance perhaps to be struck, because checks and balances, including the rule of law itself, are vitally important to a democracy. Democracy does not stop at the ballot box. Judges in both America and Britain are crucial to the implementation of democracy, and also to keep the executive in check if it overreaches. However, you don't want judges to be activists, whatever their politics, and that's why I say it's quite a difficult balance to be struck. On the substance of the issue itself, I think that Trump's order, executive order, if that's what it was, just appalling. To put the horrific killing of those American military personnel, the response to that should not, in my view, have been to punish human beings with real lives and dependents and people who care about them with real issues from 39 countries, got nothing to do with that appalling double shooting, and they should, and their lives are being massively negatively impacted, and as you've said in your introduction, Will, put on hold. That is not a responsible reaction to what was a horrific pair of killings.
Well, Benedict, I want to get your thoughts on the substance here and the principle of a travel ban, and perhaps if it can apply in the United Kingdom. We know now, people will quibble over the numbers, but we know that there are some groups from some countries which are more likely to commit particular crimes than other countries. I don't think that's particularly controversial when you think that there are some cultures which have different education systems, where they have different attitudes towards women. I think this is pretty common sense, and that's why you see those sorts of disproportions in statistics. Do you think that those sort of disproportionate numbers is adequate justification for, say, a travel ban on principle?
I think, actually, yes, it is fine to put sweeping travel bans in place from certain countries, because there are certain cases where the overall threat that is posed to the host nation, so to speak, outweighs a great deal of benefit that can be gleaned by, be it tourism or be it people coming to work in that country for legal means. I mean, there are plenty of examples that you could give, but I think, one in the UK and in most of Europe would certainly be the Albanians. When you consider quite how many are involved in the global cocaine trade, it's not simply a handful here or there, it's a significant double-digit percentage that are involved in that, because it's a large part of how that economy is propped up. Now, is that the fault of ordinary Albanians? No. Is it a serious problem for countries that are affected by this poison? Yes, it absolutely is. And I think whilst certain countries then, like the United States maybe, or Britain, are trying to get a hold of certain elements of, criminality, there's nothing wrong with, I think, putting a temporary ban in place, or again, countries that are exporting great deals of, say, political or religious extremists in certain cases. If you don't have a handle on that or know how to combat that, I don't think there's anything wrong in principle.
Did you just say, Benedict, we should have no Albanians coming into our country? No Albanian tourists?
No, I said that that's within the right of a government, should it decide to do so. If you want to put it,
would you support it?
Oh, well, nobody's actually proposing it. But actually, when it comes to certain countries, and that was one example, but you can take another one. This isn't actually a country. It's an autonomous region, but that would be Kurdistan, which is, the sheer number of people smuggling, human trafficking rings run out of Kurdistan by Kurdish gangs. This is well documented. There is no actual questioning of this. The sheer proportion of people from that part of the world operating in Western nations who are involved in this trade is staggering.
We've got lots of Albanians and lots of Kurds.
And what I would say, yes, I am still talking, but what I would say is if your government is not able actually to get to grips with that trade, if its police don't quite have the capacity to deal with that in isolation, should a government decide as an emergency measure, OK, we're going to stop visas from this particular country until such a time as we can get a hold of this, because it is an admission also a failure by the host nation. In principle, actually, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
So you are proposing it? You are proposing it?
Why would I be proposing it? I'm not a politician. We're talking about that as a hypothetical. We're talking about that as a hypothetical. What we're talking about here is the United States, and the United States is putting certain bans on other countries. Now, I don't know if Albania is one of those countries. I don't know if Kurdistan Autonomous Region is part of one of those countries. I don't know which ones we're talking about. What I'm saying here is the principle at stake here. A government can decide to whom it opens or closes its borders. There's nothing wrong with that. And if the Trump administration is effectively admitting there are certain people from certain countries that we do not have the ability to get a handle on, I don't see actually, in principle, what's wrong with them doing that.
Yeah, it's absolutely outrageous. We've got very many Albanians, completely law-abiding citizens, British citizens who contribute to our society.
It's a hypothetical.
Let me respond, because that's outrageous.
I'm going to take the point of saying I haven't even finished my point. If what you're going to say is, I'm going to just cut in across that. It's not outrageous.
Totally outrageous.
Both of you stop. Both of you stop. Both of you.
Which is justified.
Stop for a second. I don't understand. I'm happy to take up that position, Matthew. Let's use, say, a country like Eritrea or Somalia. If you have a series of criteria where you say, on balance, the people that come from this country need to be net economic contributors to the economy, and there needs to be a safe level, as in they are not going to disproportionately commit crimes at a certain rate, then we will allow them in. If they don't meet that criteria, we will not. That's not to suggest that all the people who would come to this country would be criminals or would, for example, be net economic detractors, but what it means is that unfortunately you don't have the ability in the Home Office to be able to do a one-to-one assessment every single time, and as a result of that you need to basically make some decisions across countries. Surely that balancing act or that cost-benefit analysis is just rational.
No, it's outrageous nonsense. And I will finish my rebuttal of what Benedict said. We have got, I don't know what the number is, but a very significant number of British Albanians in this country, no doubt a significant but smaller number of British Kurds who are contributing to our society, who are going to our universities. We're talking about children growing up here apart from anything else. And if either of you are seriously suggesting that their relatives and friends shouldn't be allowed to visit them on a visa or whatever you require if you come from Albania or Kurdistan, and come and celebrate with them their birthdays or whatever it is, come and do a bit of tourism, that is a disgraceful thing to be said. And I can tell you this, GB News is watched by a lot of people, and there will be British Albanians watching and no doubt British Kurds, and you're saying to them, or you're proposing to them, that their relatives should not be able to come and visit them. Absolutely outrageous.
Okay,
I think you need to learn what a hypothetical is.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily the issue around Albania, but it is the principle that if you have a group of people and on balance that group of people will not be public benefit, then it is okay to make a blanket assessment across that group. Greg, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. And I think you could have other criteria as well. Do they assimilate into the country? So why would we wave in more migrants, whether they're legal or illegal, if they're not assimilating? And we've seen this in several cities in the United States and several cities in the United Kingdom. So, that could be a criteria. Are they going to be a burden on the state? Are they going to be a burden on the welfare system? And in the case of the UK, on the National Health Service? And so those are legitimate questions, because you have to look after the good of your people. And so why would we take, people from, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to name countries because I'll get the treatment from Matthew that Benedict just got. But look, I think it's important that we look at different criteria. Again, is there a burden, and are they assimilating? Those are legitimate concerns.
Yeah, I think, as I said, if the Home Office was capable of doing a detailed, in-depth analysis of every single person from every single country to determine their ability to assimilate, their likelihood of committing crime and their ability to be able to contribute to the economy, you may not need to make these sorts of more blanket decisions. But unfortunately, the government has well and truly shown that they are incapable of doing that, and so difficult decisions which require generalisation may need to be made. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, are guns the problem or the protection? Because tonight, one Democrat-led state appears to be facing the law of unintended consequences after plans to ban assault weapons. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News. A top Trump ally in the United States has warned the UK government against using sensitive backdoor technology to spy on Americans. Representative for Ohio Jim Jordan has written to Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood raising concerns about a lack of security cooperation, saying Britain may be using encryption to gain access to US citizens' private data. He pointed out, or I should say data, he pointed out to the UK's Investigatory Powers Act 2016, which allows the government to issue secret orders known as technical capability notices. With me now is political commentator Stephen Kent. Stephen, so good for you to join us. Bring us up to speed here. What's happening?
Yeah, so this all started at least in 2025 in Washington, D.C., when a bipartisan group of U.S. lawmakers on the Senate and the House side, Republicans and Democrats, they signed a letter to the UK Home Office demanding transparency for a hearing involving the technology company Apple. There was a concern that there was going to be a crack made in the encryption services offered by Apple at the behest of the UK government, and the US wanted to be clued into it. The main problem here is that when you get a backdoor created by the UK government in order to, say, enact national security purposes or surveil domestic terrorists or foreign terrorists operating in the country, that dragnet also includes Americans visiting your country. And it also is the case that when you create a backdoor through encryption within your own borders, that backdoor exists everywhere. That is the nature of the digital world, and it creates a huge vulnerability for American consumers, which is why Jim Jordan has been on this now for so long.
Yeah, what do you think? We've been talking about differences when it comes to free speech between the two countries, differences when it comes to integration within particular cultural groups. What do you think this particular case says about what I would suggest is perhaps an increasing divide between the United Kingdom and the United States of America?
Yeah, well, I think, what Jim Jordan is asking for here from Mahmood is for permission to be given to U.S. firms operating within the UK to share with their U.S. stakeholders and with the U.S. government that they have been subject to an encryption backdoor. So basically right now, if a U.S. company is operating in London, they cannot disclose to anybody involved in the firm that the UK government has a backdoor into their services, their technology, and it puts Americans at risk of cyber attacks from Russian intelligence services, Iranian, North Korean, Chinese. And what is so frustrating about this, by and large, is that those four countries that I mentioned, they are opposed to the interests of Canada, the US, Britain, Australia, the Five Eyes Coalition, as it's called when it comes to intelligence services. We are not banding together to support one another and create a firewall against our enemies. We are spending a lot of time surveilling one another and not actually acting like allies. And I think that's the most concerning part here, is that we don't look out for each other on each side of the Atlantic. And there are a lot of reasons for that. The animosity between our countries has been building up for a litany of reasons, but I think we should be able to put those things aside when it comes to basic consumer protection and surveillance concerns.
Yeah, does this also have an impact on foreign investment from the United States into the United Kingdom? The United Kingdom is almost in, I guess, a quasi-competition with Europe for American investment dollars. How does this play out from that perspective?
I'm not sure how it will play out in terms of investment. I think that there would be an obvious concern if you are a technology company in having an office, like a headquarters building located in the UK, because then that makes you subject to those rules. So that is the main concern. But, what we're seeing here right now is a huge change in the paradigm and how the U.S. views encryption. Historically, encryption, on my iPhone, Apple is really the best in the game for consumer protection for people who use their devices. And this was a frustration point for the U.S. government, both the FBI, the CIA, and the intelligence committees within Congress, because anytime a terrorist did something within the U.S. and then his iPhone was left at the scene, the FBI could not get into those devices without the permission of Apple. And so Congress, for many, many years, particularly in the 2010s, was pushing for a backdoor into those devices. But that has changed because Congress has learned, and I think been briefed by our cybersecurity analysts at this point, that when you create those backdoors for the purpose of domestic terrorism or countering terrorism abroad, you end up creating a problem for all consumers, everybody who uses an iPhone. And the UK has not caught up on this conventional wisdom when it comes to tech and security, and they really need to.
Stephen Kent, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Let's go to my panel now. We'll start in London. Benedict, what do you make of this story?
I mean, obviously, espionage has become a serious concern for many Western governments across the world in the last couple of years, and something that we all have to take seriously on a sort of a private level and on a national level. And I think it's one of those things where, as technology sort of continues apace and everybody sort of struggles to keep up with these sorts of things, I mean, the sheer number, for example, of hacking incidents that we hear about increasingly. I think everybody remembers in this country certainly the Jaguar Land Rover hack, which has done tremendous damage to that company. And of course, we also have had hacks carried out against the NHS and other entities in this country as well. And it's something that we need to remember, is that there are all sorts of people who can and will use any means to degrade people, either in their private lives or in public. That can be state actors, that can be criminal organizations, and it is something that as you go through life and you become more sort of technologically plugged in, so to speak, it's something that everybody has to take a lot more seriously, as I say, both at an individual level or at a national one.
Hillary, your thoughts?
Well, I think it all depends how the information is used. And of course, you can say, well, it's just across the Five Eyes, it's been very effective when we've needed to help each other, nations sharing information, finding out a deep dive into whether there's terrorism, etc. But when it's used nefariously, and it depends who's in power, is it going to be the left, is it going to be the right, who wants their personal information used for sort of, let's just say, intrusive matters? I don't think that it's very palatable at all. I think that there is a place for it. Like I said, Five Eyes, we need things militarily and to prevent terrorism. But I think individuals, whether they're politicians, business people, or your regular citizens, don't want any of this sort of intrusion. But where's the line? How do you determine, well, we need this for terrorism and we don't? So I think it's a line that is very difficult to define. And I don't think it's been defined either side of the pond. And I think if I was to say which way would we all rather err, I think we'd all rather err on being safe.
Matthew?
I'd rather assume that the state is aware, or could be aware if it wanted to be, of what I'm doing online. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I think it's another interesting and difficult area, the tension between our individual liberty, very, very important, and also our desire to remain safe as citizens and as a country. On the issue as between America and Britain, clearly it's unbelievably important that there is still a very close relationship between these two great countries. My belief is that behind the scenes, the security forces, security services are still working very, very closely together. But if anyone's done anything to undermine, or certainly a significant amount to undermine, the transatlantic relationship and allyship, that is unquestionably Donald Trump, who has publicly questioned NATO and said things that Vladimir Putin over in Moscow would be absolutely delighted about.
Greg, your response to Matthew's comments?
Yeah, look, the president is very outspoken and he's unfiltered, but what he says is true. And his criticisms, as have been J.D. Vance's, Marco Rubio's, they're actually right. They really care about the United Kingdom as our closest ally, and they really care about NATO. But the freeloading was unacceptable to them and unacceptable to U.S. taxpayers. You know, so for generations, U.S. taxpayers have been funding free health care in the United Kingdom and 6 weeks of holiday in Germany and France, and that's just unsustainable. We're now spending 2/3 of our annual budget on welfare. We used to spend 1/3 when Reagan was president. So, you know, we've got these problems too. So I don't think any criticism of the president is even anything but virtue signaling or Trump derangement syndrome, frankly. So, look, I think, you know, and on the topic, look, we had the Patriot Act after 9/11, and you can understand why there was a lot of pressure to increase surveillance, and I think we overstepped. I'd really like to roll back some of the Patriot Act and kind of lean toward privacy over. And look, if you are going to really, you know, open someone's phone, get a warrant. That's what they're there for.
Matthew, I'll go back, but I'll put this more generally because at 2:30 at night, the finer points of privacy legislation are probably going over my head. And I'll pull it back to the special relationship more generally. Do you think that this is further evidence, if indeed there ever was a special relationship, that it is now either beyond repair or fraying at the seams?
No, I don't. I think that there is definitely still a special relationship, and it extends well beyond what you might think of Starmer or Trump. The idea, by the way, that any criticism of the American president, democratically elected as he is some form of Trump derangement syndrome is completely absurd and speaks to the way Trump behaves, as I said earlier, as a bit like a king. We don't talk when Starmer is criticised, and he's relentlessly criticised in this country and abroad by so many people, including by you, I think, Greg. We don't talk about Starmer derangement syndrome. It is a key plank of democracy that our democratically elected leaders are properly scrutinised.
Hillary, I'll go to you. Is the Trump derangement syndrome thing just a way to deflect legitimate criticism against Donald Trump?
I actually do, and also what's so ironic, Will, is when people actually criticize President Trump when other presidents, particularly Democratic presidents, did exactly the same thing, or even more so. For example, if we just take one instance with regard to the ICE deportations, President Obama deported millions more, so did President Clinton, actually so did Bush, and there was zero protests. And also, this is the first time we've really seen in American history that deep relationships, family relationships, friend relationships have been destroyed by people taking a position on the left where it really never happened in our nation before. So I think there is a degree here where it's hypocritical. And if I just want to add to that ICE situation, it was President Obama who gave Tom Homan, who's in charge of ICE, a presidential award, a presidential honorary award, and he was deporting more people than President Trump ever has. And no one was complaining, like I said, no protests. So that is a derangement when you're taking the same facts, actually even not as bad, in quotes, bad as facts, and you're reacting a different way. That is deranged, yes.
Benedict, I'll get your final thoughts, and particularly, do you think that Trump derangement syndrome, as it is used, is a way for people to just to shrug off what are legitimate concerns about the way that, say, Trump behaves or Trump's policies?
I think the polarising of American politics has been very aggressive, and I do think that Trump derangement syndrome is, well, you know, it's obviously used as a bit of a pejorative, but I do think that it is real, and I do think that it leads to quite irrational responses. But equally, I do think that it means that lots of people on his own side are able to dismiss legitimate criticisms. I'd say that this is just a symptom of a broader polarisation in American politics, but we are starting to see it in Europe as well. Frankly, in the UK, we have seen it for some time. It's not actually very healthy. I know that people say that rigorous debate is healthy. That certainly is the case, but this isn't actually what I think is what we call debate. Nobody ever seems to change their minds. Nobody's ever convinced. It's two sides largely shouting at each other at very different positions and aiming at different positions beyond the other side. There's very little in the way of conciliation or trying to build bridges or trying to find consensus. I understand politics is about division by definition, but actually, in the United States in particular, you've got two sides that, if anything, seem to want to pull even further apart from each other.
Well said. How you fix that is another conversation entirely, and I would suggest far more difficult. government spokesperson has said that it would respond to Mr Jordan's letter in the normal way in due course, but said there would be no comment on operational matters, including confirming or denying the existence of such notices. They added, national security is our first priority. We have a long-standing legislative framework, including security and intelligence arrangements with the US, that enables us to tackle serious threats whilst safeguarding the privacy of our citizens. Let's take a quick look at some other main news stories in America. 3 British men have admitted killing a restaurant owner in Canada. Robert Evans Jr. pleaded guilty on Friday to the manslaughter of Sharif Rahman after a row over an unpaid restaurant bill in the town of Owen Sound in August 2023. His father and uncle also pleaded guilty to being accessories to the crime and have been sentenced to time already served. Elsewhere, a massive coastal resort development in Albania linked to President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner has sparked days of protests, which you are seeing on the screen now. Police have fired water cannons and clashed with demonstrators in the capital, Tirana, this week as public anger grows. Plans for the luxury project boast hotels, apartments, villas and a marina across 2 sites with a detail I particularly like a wildlife reserve, which is a key stopover for migratory birds, including but not limited to flamingos. And finally, Canada's Food Inspection Agency has announced a temporary ban on livestock from the US state of Texas after flesh-eating screwworms were discovered in calves this week. Still ahead on The Late Show Live.
So we are growing our economy, we're bringing down the cost of living.
Are you though, Rachel? Because tonight there's a fresh warning that Britain is heading for a debt crisis. But also still ahead, are guns the problem or only the thing stopping the problem? It's the eternal debate on gun laws in America, and tonight one Democrat-run state is discovering that threatening to ban assault weapons can have a very unexpected effect on the public. This is The Late Show Live, only on the People's Channel, GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, Sunday promises to be a warmer day for most of us, particularly in the east, where we should hold on to some hazy sunshine. But it's a different story in the north and the west, where we'll continue to see some outbreaks of rain at times, particularly this morning across Northern Ireland and into the early part of the afternoon. The rain quite heavy also for parts of central and western Scotland too. Tending to turn a little bit damper across northwest England, parts of Wales into this afternoon, but the rain here somewhat lighter overall. The best of the weather, generally speaking, across more central and eastern parts of England. Here temperatures could well rise into the low 20s quite widely, and there will continue to be some spells of hazy sunshine, indeed into this evening too. So parts of East Anglia and the south east should actually have a fine end to the weekend and still relatively warm as well. Further west though, the cloud will be always thickening through the course of the afternoon, so southwest England will see a few outbreaks of light rain and turning increasingly damp this evening for Wales, the Pennine regions, and some quite heavy bursts of rain shown here by these red colours just clearing out from Northern Ireland. A bit of a showery end to the weekend also for most of Scotland, but a bright end to Sunday for the Northwest Highlands, where there'll be some evening sunshine. Then there'll be a few showers overnight for the northwest, but the most persistent rain will gradually shift its way from Scotland and Northern Ireland into England and Wales. Still quite showery initially, but some quite heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain pushing into northwest England and Wales, shown here by these yellow colours by the end of the night. But a mild night to come for England and Wales, 13s and 14s, the minimum temperatures for many. A much chillier start to Monday in the northwest. So in northwest Scotland, sunshine from the word go on Monday, sunnier skies with a few showers for Northern Ireland too, and these brighter skies chasing that rain band eastwards, but a wet day to come for many parts of England and Wales, particularly in the east, with some fairly heavy bursts of rain continuing into the afternoon. Brightening up in the west and feeling pleasant in any sunshine, highs of 16 or 17 degrees, but generally a much cooler day to come compared to yesterday.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live, only on the People's Channel, GB News. Thank you for staying with us this morning. Well, gun sales in the state of Virginia have rocketed in recent months amidst the onset of the ban on the sale of assault weapons. This is due to take effect in July. The looming ban has been seen as a significant reason why there were a staggering 75,000 background checks for guns in May alone. The fight over the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms is always a fractious debate in the United States of America. But from a US and UK perspective, with increased crime and lawlessness, are guns a problem or a form of protection? I'll go back to my panel in London. We have Benedict Spence and Matthew Stadlen, and of course in Washington DC, Greg Swenson and Hilary Fordwich. Hilary, I'll start with you. The way that we frame this is in many respects the eternal debate in the United States of America. Bring us up to speed on what's happening here, as well as, I would say more generally, what is the current sentiment around the gun debate in the country?
Well, everything here is by state. States are completely different, and obviously whoever is elected can completely change a state. So I live very close to Virginia. We all do here in the DC region. It's called the DMV, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, and I have all my friends that are in Virginia say the same thing, even those that are actually on the left, which is Spanberger ran on one platform and she's really changed what she ran on. She ran as a moderate and she's now turned really actually left and is implementing many, many laws. Their utility bills are going through the ceiling. She's changing tax laws. And now with regard to this gun control, it's a contentious issue, Will. It always is. Every time there is a shooting or any mass shooting, it's always talked about with gun control. But if we could link this to what's happened obviously in the UK with Henry Novak, I mean, if somebody wants to kill someone, they can do it with a knife, they can do it with a gun. Now,
well, Hilary, I'll pause you there, because that isn't quite the case. Well, whilst it is technically right, you can kill people with an assault weapon on a mass scale in the way that you can't kill them with a knife. It is the amount of damage and the intensity of damage that it could do.
Yes, and I was just going to say an assault weapon, a rapid-fire weapon. Obviously, it's very different, particularly, like, as far as I'm concerned, for people, individual, citizens to have machine guns and rapid-fire assault weapons. But yes, a gun can still, one shot can kill someone just like a knife can. So my issue is, and I think a lot of Americans say the same thing, which is the problem is if you have gun control, the criminals always manage to get the guns anyway, and the proof in the pudding with that, Will, is that the cities and the states with the tightest gun control laws actually have the highest amount of crimes because the regular citizens can't prevent it and the criminals run wild. And I know that Greg knows about that because you can look to Chicago, and when people were saying, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, and the greatest amount of crime in the United States of America is black on black crime, particularly in the cities where many people have weapons.
Greg, many people would argue that the Second Amendment is an incredibly important part of the American Constitution. If someone wants to have a handgun in their home for personal protection, that's fine, but having the ability to get an assault weapon, which can, as I said, do enormous amount of damage in the way that, say, a handgun can't, is where a line should be drawn. Why shouldn't a line be drawn between, say, handguns and then assault weapons?
No, it's a great question, Will, and I think that's another occasion to clarify some of the truths and myths here. And so, less than 1% of homicides or 92% of violent crime is done without guns. But if you talk about handguns versus rifles, less than 1% are done with rifles. So, if you wanted to really ban the ability to shoot your spouse or shoot your neighbor, you would ban handguns. And the governor of Virginia should know better, Spanberger. First of all, she ran, as Hillary said, she ran as a moderate, so she's a really professional liar here. She ran as a moderate, now she's doing all these crazy progressive things. But the second point is it's really virtue signaling, because the assault rifles, again, are less than 1% of the homicides. And she should know, because it's the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice that came out with this study of 600 homicides. Less than 1% were done with assault rifles. I've said that already. And then think about the Virginia Tech, big university in Virginia. That's the biggest mass shooting in American history. Not as big as some of the ones in Europe, but the biggest in American history, done with 2 handguns. The third thing is, remember, Charlie Kirk was assassinated less than a year ago. It was done with an older model 30 caliber hunting rifle. Not only are those traditional American rifles, but they're legal, and I don't imagine Matthew is a hunter, but they're legal in England. They're legal in every state in America, all 50 states, Canada, and England. And so it's just a myth. And I think she's just virtue signaling to, you know, it's performative to please her radical left base.
Matthew, I'll give you the right of reply.
No, I think it's perfectly possible there are unintended consequences in what we're talking about right now, that people may be rushing to get guns, but a certain type of gun before they're banned. I hope that there is plenty of scope to reform gun laws in America. For example, to stop the sort of weapons being sold that you're talking about. Well, overall, I suspect the genie is out of the bottle. It's probably too late to solve this properly and in a wholesale way. All I would say is, I looked up in one of the breaks earlier the stat that I gave you. It is true that there were 44,000 gun-related deaths in 2024
Matthew,
in America. Let me just make the point quickly.
Matthew,
let me make the point. I want to hear you
Greg,
come back, but
Greg,
let me just make the point. We have a fraction, a tiny fraction of gun-related deaths in the United Kingdom, and guess why that is? Because we have very, very different gun laws. Would I feel safer bringing up my children, my young children in America than Britain? Absolutely not. I feel there are certainly risks here, but I feel so much more safe bringing them up here. I know a family in America who love America. America is a wonderful, brilliant, amazing country in so many ways. One of the most beautiful countries in the world. I've been many times. There's so much that's fantastic about it. But this family are looking to move to Britain because they don't want to bring their children up in a culture where there are so many school shootings.
Greg?
Another myth, but also consider this, Matthew. Of the 44,000, 62% of those are suicides. So I don't think people are running around shooting each other in the street, except in the
Does suicide not count? Sorry, does suicide not count?
Where they don't prosecute criminals. So the same governor and her base are the people that refuse to prosecute criminals. They've got these radical left DAs funded by George Soros that have decided that prison sentences and prosecuting crime is racist. And so this goes back to the big topic of the night. And so, you know, this is not something that will be solved by more gun laws. As the more gun laws we have, the more school shootings we have, and the more gun violence we have. So it's prosecuting criminals. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when it was a hell of a lot easier to get a gun, there were many fewer school shootings. They've happened for, 100 years, but just a lot fewer.
All I can say is that, as I've already said, America in many ways is a great country, but a massive flaw of your system is the way in which you are entitled to carry guns. I understand the law is different from state to state, but it is a serious blight on your country, and by whatever means, 44,000 people losing their lives in gun-related deaths in 2024. It's just almost impossible to get one's mind around that statistic.
Well, you could argue there's a mental health crisis. If 62% of those people are killing themselves, they'll find another way to do that.
Okay? A lot of them veterans.
Yeah, that's a mental health issue. Okay, so
Greg, to interrupt, and I apologise to interrupt with you, but the argument would be that there are mental health issues across countries. The variable that is different between, say, the United States and the UK or Europe is guns. Mental health, I imagine, would be relatively consistent as a problem.
Absolutely. But again, when the UK banned handguns, homicides went up 50%. Yeah. Okay, so that's not the solution. More gun control is not the solution. More policing is the solution. In fact, when the UK rates went up 50% after the 1997 gun ban, thank you, Tony Blair, it was only when they increased policing by 14% did they get the homicide level back to normal. So it's just a myth that more gun control is going to is going to reduce violent crime or homicides.
Benedict has been waiting patiently. Benedict, your thoughts on this debate?
I mean, just on the subject of, homicides going up when there are gun bans, that tends to be because people then start to use knives, and there's a massive misconception about how easy it is to kill somebody with a knife, and that's part of the reason we have such a huge amount of knife crime-related death increasingly. But just listening to this debate just in the round, it's curious because it's almost a sort of a 20th century debate for a 21st century problem, because what is it that it is that Americans have guns for? It's for self-protection and as a defense against tyrannical regimes. But the weapon of the future, I wouldn't even say the weapon of the future, the weapon of today is not a gun. It's certainly not a semi-automatic weapon. It's a drone, which anybody can purchase pretty easily. Anybody can use very easily. They can do it remotely, and they can be very nasty. They can be loaded with all sorts of things. And the irony of that situation is it's not a semi-automatic weapon or a fully automatic weapon that's going to save you from a drone. The best defense, as they found in Ukraine, is a good old-fashioned shotgun. So actually, if you really want to arm yourself against the tyranny of governments or of terrorist organizations, if that's seriously what it is that you want to do, and that's what it was in the Constitution for, you need to get yourself a shotgun, not a semi-automatic weapon.
Benedict, I plead ignorance here. I'm aware of the use of drones, obviously, in modern warfare and how it's been an incredibly important part of Iran, Ukraine, and a range of modern conflicts. I'm unaware of how drones are being used in domestic crime. Is that something that is proliferating?
No, it's not so much that they're currently being used in domestic crime, certainly not in the United States. They are being used to settle gang disputes in certain countries, in Latin America, for instance, and this is sort of the point. As we get to a point in which drones and robotics and other things become more commonplace in the use by militaries, which they are, that inevitably ends up being fed into other areas of life. And it will start with criminality, but that will eventually end up becoming domestic as well. And that's partly because, of course, it reduces the amount of risk to the user. If you want to actually go and murder somebody, you're far better off using a drone with something attached to it than being at the scene of the crime yourself with a gun. So to suggest that this is not something that's going to happen in the very near future, listen, it's only a few years ago that the idea of using drones on the battlefield, full stop, just didn't exist, and now it is the most common form of warfare.
Yeah, interesting angle I hadn't considered. Let's delve into some of the main stories on the front pages tomorrow, I should say today. Starting with the front page of the Sunday Telegraph, which is reporting that Labor risks being forced to seek emergency help from the International Monetary Fund as Britain lurches towards a debt crisis, leading economists have warned. In a warning shot to Labor, the former IMF chief economist Ken Rogoff said a major UK debt crisis before the end of the decade was now more likely than not. That is a terrifying warning, but I dare say not an unsurprising one. Let's go to my panel in London. Benedict, I'll go back to you because I've ended up with you a couple of times. I think some of our, I'm not going to say older, our more distinguished viewers and listeners would remember the 1970s and the IMF bailout of the 1970s. My understanding is that if the UK was to go to the IMF cap in hand now, the IMF wouldn't have the funds available to actually be able to solve this problem. This is what is so terrifying.
That is true, sadly, which I suppose to some degree actually shows you the limits of international financial institutions. They're not all powerful, but it's not just that they wouldn't have enough to potentially bail us out, because we're not the only country that might need their assistance at some point. France, as well, is in a very difficult situation, and actually their financial black hole, so to speak, is in some ways a lot worse than ours. So, none of these things are particularly positive, and, the way to get out of this, obviously, is economic growth. And I know Matthew spoke earlier about how ours is the highest in the G7, but amongst the entirety of the G7, that growth is anemic, it's not real. In order to solve so many problems the Western countries are facing, you need to get growth going again. And, listen, we don't necessarily have time to get into how that might be. We've had successive governments, Conservatives promising to, cut taxes and all that sort of thing. It didn't necessarily work out. Some would say Liz Truss didn't get a fair crack of the whip, but now we have Labour in and we're potentially about to lurch even further to the left. That is what you need if you're going to get yourself out of this hole. And it's very telling, I think, that you do have all of these developed nations, or many of them at the same time, all potentially looking over their shoulders, looking towards international financial institutions like the IMF, like other big lenders, and saying, what are our options, because none of them are good.
Yeah, Matthew, I would add to the growth agenda. I would argue there isn't a real growth agenda in the UK at the moment. There needs to be a concerted effort to rein in spending, and again, this is something the Conservatives weren't really able to do, particularly the back end of their government, and then now the Labor government have shown no willingness in really reining in spending. Do you agree that that needs to happen? And if so, how do you do that, particularly when the public and the Labor backbench are unwilling to go along with that?
So we could speak about this for hours, but clearly anyone who is Prime Minister with half a brain would be desperate for significant growth. I think it is an achievement that we're the highest in the G7, but clearly the government wants more. Clearly we need more as well. And clearly debt is too high. That would be my view. I don't think we're in the territory of an IMF bailout, whether or not they can bail us out. I think that is alarmist. I would worry if there were a reform government. I'm mildly concerned that Andy Burnham hasn't got the plan that some in the Labour Party might assume that he has. I think this government has done a reasonable job of managing the stability of the economy, but clearly there are areas that we're going to have to look and should be looking at very, very closely in terms of how much money we spend and whether we do need cuts. Welfare is an obvious example. Labour failed to drive through their intended plans last year. And as part of welfare is pensions. And there is a lot of talk about the triple lock and whether that is sustainable. The grey vote makes that very difficult politically, but we have to get serious and have those conversations as a country.
Greg, this is obviously not, when I say this, debt is obviously not a problem that is limited to the United Kingdom. The debt in the United States is terrifying. And once again, both the Republicans and the Democrats show no real interest in touching it. Does there need to be a debt crisis in the Western world now for people to actually remember that you can't keep going and borrowing money willy-nilly without consequences?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I'm of course really worried about it. It's it's pushing 40 trillion at this point, and we have sort of the advantage, but also the disadvantage of having the world's reserve currency. We can just keep borrowing, and we can print money, and that's good that we don't have to we don't have caps on the amount of money we could borrow. But on the other hand, it doesn't provide any discipline for the politicians. And yeah, it's both parties are guilty. We have had some success in the last year, mostly because of growth and some of the cuts to federal spending. So we've brought the debt, the annual debt, from 4.5% of GDP down to, or 5.5% of GDP down to 4.5% of GDP. That's a good sign, but we have a lot more work to do.
Hillary, you were saying to me offline about Trump's growth agenda, and how do you see this as being a silver bullet to the debt crisis?
Well, put it this way, one of the things that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said is we want to grow our way out of the debt. And that would be, he's got a 3-3-3 plan. And that is, if you increase growth, you can actually grow your way out of it. That's one of his key points here. And I will also defer to what Margaret Thatcher said, which she said the problem with socialism is you run out of spending other people's money. That's what's happening in the UK. And we know that every 45 minutes, a millionaire leaves the UK. The more you tax of something, the less you get of it. So certainly raising taxes isn't the solution. We know that. It's growth, 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 growth. And that goes back to what I said earlier about the Labour government in the UK, where you don't have any business people. My faith here in the US is because Scott Bessent was on Wall Street. He knows how to make money. I do believe in his 3-3-3 plan. I do believe that is the way of the future. And as soon as, hopefully, we can get this war over with Iran, we will turn back to the growth, increasing the GDP, lowering the debt. And I think that will be solved by growth.
Benedict, I'll go to you finally to move back to the United Kingdom. Is there, or do you have any confidence that this Labor government, where there was already a backbench revolt over moderate cuts last year, do you have any confidence that they will be able to get to a more fiscally responsible position before the next election?
No, I don't. And I think that that's an important point to raise, which is that, as has been discussed on this panel, in particular, the welfare bill is bloated, it's too big, it's, for whatever reason you want to say that we need to have very generous welfare in this country, the maths doesn't quite add up. Whilst you have backbenchers that oppose quite as aggressively as the Labour ones do any change to that, it's actually going to be very difficult, I think, to find any meaningful reform to any kind kind of major spending in the UK. Until you get to that point, until you get a government that can actually push those sort of changes through, nothing will change. And I would say it doesn't matter how much the Prime Minister may wish to do that, if he can't convince his backbenchers, he hasn't got a hope.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. That's all we have time for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for spending your night with The Late Show Live. Thank you to my wonderful panel, Hillary, Greg, Matthew and Benedict. I'll be back tomorrow night. Make sure you join us from midnight in the UK. Have a very lovely morning.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, Sunday promises to be a warmer day for most of us, particularly in the east, where we should hold on to some hazy sunshine. But it's a different story in the north and the west, where we'll continue to see some outbreaks of rain at times, particularly this morning across Northern Ireland and into the early part of the afternoon. The rain quite heavy also for parts of central and western Scotland too. Tending to turn a little bit damper across northwest England, parts of Wales into this afternoon, but the rain here somewhat lighter overall. The best of the weather, generally speaking, across more central and eastern parts of England. Here temperatures could well rise into the low 20s quite widely, and there will continue to be some spells of hazy sunshine, indeed into this evening too. So parts of East Anglia and the south east should actually have a fine end to the weekend and still relatively warm as well. Further west though, the cloud will be always thickening through the course of the afternoon, so southwest England will see a few outbreaks of light rain and turning increasingly damp this evening for Wales, the Pennine regions, and some quite heavy bursts of rain shown here by these red colours, just clearing out from Northern Ireland. A bit of a showery end to the weekend also for most of Scotland, but a bright end to Sunday for the Northwest Highlands, where there'll be some evening sunshine. Then there'll be a few showers overnight for the northwest, but the most persistent rain will gradually shift its way from Scotland and Northern Ireland into England and Wales. Still quite showery initially, but some quite heavy and persistent outbreaks of rain pushing into northwest England and Wales, shown here by these yellow colours by the end of the night. But a mild night to come for England and Wales, 13s and 14s, the minimum temperatures for many. A much chillier start to Monday in the northwest. So in northwest Scotland, sunshine from the word go on Monday, sunnier skies with a few showers for Northern Ireland too, and these brighter skies chasing that rain band eastwards, but a wet day to come for many parts of England and Wales, particularly in the east, with some fairly heavy bursts of rain continuing into the afternoon. Brightening up in the west and feeling pleasant in any sunshine, highs of 16 or 17 degrees, but generally a much cooler day to come compared to yesterday.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Five hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me. Do you trust what you're being told? Good, because neither do I.
Those are just facts.
I'm Alex Armstrong, and on my show, we'll expose the spin.
Well, I want to answer that, because you didn't let me last time, because you always speak over me.
The broken promises.
To deny that is denying the truth.
And the hypocrisy.
Needs to stop. You think we can allow?
Politics, policy, parliament. Nothing is off limits. No sugarcoating, no fear of offence, just the truth laid bare. Tune in every Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. for Alex Armstrong Tonight, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters. Real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you. Bulletins on GB News,
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The GB News audience is different, it's unique, because they see through the nonsense.
We want to debate with each other. We want to listen and maybe learn.
We have a chat. That's what we do. We try and have a chat.
They'll watch my programme while they're eating their tea. They'll watch breakfast while they're busy getting their kids ready for school.
We want to hear what matters to you. What is news for you?
And what's brought you out here today?
What are the biggest issues affecting this particular area?
The audience are the best thing about GB News.
Their friends, their family. They're people who need to have their voices heard.
They're passionate about the channel. They're passionate about what they believe in.
The one thing about GB News is you get a chance to speak.
Talk to me about why so many people have gathered here today.
Do you want to say something back in return? The GB News audience is what makes GB News special.
It's incredible to see.
They shape our programmes, they shape our output, and they shape our channel.
That's what makes us the fearless champion of Britain.